I would like to dedicate this book to my husband for his never-ending support in making my book a reality. And thank you to my two precious children Abby and Lucas, Abby who helped me so much, and to Lucas for being a good baby and allowing Mummy to write. I also would like to thank 4 of my lifelong friends for always keeping after me to write a book: Meredith, mostly, Barb, Mia, and Vicky. What a day. What a rotten day. It was drizzling rain and chilly. The locals are used to it, the sudden summer chills of San Francisco that surprise and catch visitors to the region rushing for their sweaters. Almost every morning and afternoon through the months of May, June, and July, a foggy, gray soup rushes in from the Pacific Ocean to envelop the northern coastal and valley regions of California. This was one of those days. I suppose it fit the occasion. I was inside the local pharmacy store, standing at the wire transfer desk for the 3rd time in a week preparing to send money to my brother, Adam. As I completed the paperwork, I could feel myself getting really angry. Well, outrage is a better way to describe what was happening with me. Bastard. Yes, outrage mixed with stomach-churning anxiety threatening to break through the brave, smiley face I was so adept at portraying to my family, friends, and what seemed like the entire planet. Happy, happy Amelia, nothing ever bothers Amelia. Need help, call Amelia. Oh, she may say no sometimes, but she never means it, always gives in, every time, can never say no and really mean it. Just keep at her. After all, she is married to that rich Australian and he is so generous. She can afford to help. They have plenty to spare. She should help. She is family, isn't she? God, I am so tired of giving in to them, especially to Adam and that idiot wife of his, Susan. I have had enough. This is it, the last time. Oh, I know I have said that before, 100 times, 1,000 times probably over the last 10 years. What is the matter with me? Here I am again, and to make matters worse my baby son, Lucas, is sick with a cold and running a fever. I should not have him out in weather like that. It is so unlike me. I never put my children at risk. Never. I may have been a bit overprotective, even with Abby, my 10-year-old, but that is how it is when you've had as much trouble as I've had getting pregnant. I love my children. Lucas was an in vitro baby. He only came along after 9 disheartening attempts. But, that's me, I am just that determined. And, I am planning to have a 3rd child even if it takes me until I am 50 to do it. As I stood there waiting for the receipt, my mind kept running the same old mantra about how all of this came to be, how I allowed myself to be sucked into the vortex of my brother's nightmare. And now, what was once a deep love for baby brother, Adam, was evolving into a poisonous hate. The poison ran deep. Giving him money was just a symptom of the heartaches he had caused our family. As I said, I am married to a generous man. Jack had never come right out and said, no, to Adam's incessant demands. We should help if we can? He would always say to me. Unfortunately, in those early days neither of us knew what a narcissistic and conniving monster we were dealing with. Adam was a cute kid, and even though he was 8 years younger than me, I loved being with him then. We played games and went for walks. He liked that, and he had a real curiosity. He was very intelligent. That's what was so shocking, he really could have been whatever he wanted. He could twist me around his finger with just a look. I spoiled him. We all did, probably because he was the only boy. Ma loved us all, and she was a great mother. Her life was not an easy one. She was a looker, very attractive. 2 of my sisters and Adam had a different father than me. Their father was the brother of my father. His name was Steve. I loved him and mostly called him Dad. I was raised by him and my mother. Ma did the best, but somehow she messed up with everyone. She even admitted that, saying to me once, "What have I done?" Why do all of my children have problems except for you? She drives me crazy with the excuses she makes for Adam's behavior, but that's her story. He is her only son. Heck, as I said, he could play and game me every which way, why not her? There is quite a story about how I came to have two fathers, about my real daddy, Bill, and Steve, who I called Dad, and I loved them both. This is one of those stories that, if ever told at all, are usually only whispered surreptitiously within the confines of the family clique. Ma's first and only husband, Bill, was my father and the father of my older sister, Margaret. I called him Daddy. When he was in Korea in 1959, and I was just a year old, he came home on a surprise leave and found my mother in bed with his younger brother. Surprise. Shocking. I cannot remember anything of how the discovery played out at the time, I was too young, but it could not have been pleasant. Mother and Daddy divorced and Uncle Steve, Dad, and my mother got together and had 3 children, Adam, Michelle, and Chrissy. It would be many years before I was to hear the real story of what happened. Ma never told me. I eventually learned the story from one of my aunts and other relatives. There are no signs that Adam, Michelle, and Chrissy have a different father from Margaret and me. I once talked to a geneticist about it when I was pregnant with Lucas. She said, well, the fathers are brothers. The DNA chain would be close. Ma treated us all the same, loved us the same and taught us the same manners. She did her best to teach us to love and respect people. By some standards, we might have been judged a poor family, but Ma, because she never married Steve, was able to continue to receive welfare checks. What she was doing was probably illegal because she and Steve were cohabitating, and he was working 2 or 3 jobs. We had money, but my parents just misappropriated it. We had great clothes, took many nice trips and had all the toys imaginable, but the tenement houses and the schools were hardly fun. Other children around us thought we were rich, if only they knew. I liked having 3 sisters and a young brother around. We had a lot of fun playing together even though we moved around a lot and lived in houses we never owned. We grew up in the crummy areas of South Boston and Dorchester. I think we may have lived in as many as 9 houses, or I should say apartments. When I was 25 I got out of there and followed an ex-boyfriend to San Francisco. I don't mean to imply that Dorchester was a bad place to grow up. There were a lot of fun things to do, especially in the summer with the beaches of Dorchester Bay. Many a night we would go to Carson Beach or Savin Hill Beach to dig for clams and then take them home to feast. Only a New Englander would eat slimy black clams out of Dorchester Bay, but they tasted great. I think I was 13 when I had my first kiss on the beach. His name was Ron, and I remember he was older than me, about 15 I think. He had jet black hair and bright blue eyes. I thought he was extremely handsome. I was with 2 of my girlfriends standing on the water's edge, all of us in our bathing suits trying to look good for a couple of boys from our school who were hanging out and trying to look cool. They eventually came over. Ron was just staring at me and I can still see them now, with those beautiful blue eyes and long, dark eyelashes. My heart was beating so fast. I don't remember what he said, but later that afternoon we separated from the others. He kissed me lightly on the lips, and I think I thought I had gone to heaven. The experience still brings a warm glow to my heart. He was a kind person, actually. South Boston is known for being an Irish Catholic district, some might say enclave, and it has many churches, some of them extraordinary structures built in the 1800s, and church schools. We were Catholics and poor. Amazing how the church could collect money from the poor parishioners and build such huge buildings. I loved going into them. We would go up Dorchester Street to Broadway, which ran all the way to the end of the peninsula to Boston Harbor, and turn down E Street to the magnificent Gate of Heaven Catholic Church. Gate of Heaven was my favorite church. The inside was so big and the roof so high, I would feel tiny, tiny. I would save pennies to buy a small candle just so I could light it and place in the votive. Then I would kneel down to pray to the saints and watch the flame flickering along with all the others. It was quite surreal being in such a beautiful place, while close by were the decaying and bug-ridden apartments we lived in. I remember telling Margaret, "No way. No way am I going to live this way for the rest of my life. Crummy houses, crummy schools, I'm going live in my own home, a nice home in a great neighborhood, and send my children to private schools, or I'll homeschool them." Margaret was sitting on the edge of her bed tying her shoelaces, didn't even look up. "You are always going on about what you are going to do. How do you think you can afford to live like the rich? You could find a rich guy and marry him, I suppose?" "I would never, ever do that, Margaret. I can take care of myself, even if I have to work 4 jobs, I'll save for what I want, and I'll have what I want. I'll go to college and get good jobs." Little did I know then that no matter how much I worked at building a life away from the circumstances of my childhood, the lives of my mother and siblings would impact me in a far more dramatic and consequential way than I could have ever thought possible. And, guess what, it would be Adam, the cute little brother, the little guy I adored, born 8 years after me, who would innocently re-enter my life and then in a few short years drag me and my family to the edge of the hell he was creating for himself. In 1989 I married Jack. He was one of those ruggedly handsome Australians with the charisma that makes so many of them such great leading men in Hollywood movies. Errol Flynn, Peter Finch, Mel Gibson, Hugh Jackman, Russell Crowe, Guy Pearce are a few of them. Jack was my Mel Gibson, the swashbuckling hero with the winning smile and an eye for the ladies. He has that Gibson devil-may-care twinkle in his eye along with the same brilliant smile. In his own way, Jack was as courageous and ambitious as those stars when he came to the United States at 18 to make his mark. It can't be easy to move from your home country, but Jack has done extremely well and today is a vice president of one of America's prestigious and successful companies. I met him in San Francisco at work. He swept me off my feet, and I had no resistance when he asked me to marry him. The wedding was held in Boston. Jack's company had moved him to Syracuse a couple of years earlier. Boston wasn't far away, and I was always going back home for visits and then for planning my wedding. Perfect. Well, not quite. Adam was there, and he was, well, being Adam. The guests were tapping their wine glasses with spoons, a tradition not lost on Jack. He turned and kissed me. "I love you, Amelia. I love you," I said to my handsome husband, returning the kiss and enjoying the tingling sensation running through my body. Our guests responded enthusiastically with a resounding cheer. As I looked around them, there was Adam, pouting, and Susan sitting next to him wearing a most inappropriate cowgirl outfit with a short skirt. I saw Adam turn to Susan and say something. In unison, they stood up and then started to walk toward us. I could see Adam was really angry. He scared me. He really did. He reminded me of some kind of gothic deviant. "We're out of here?" Adam said. "We're hungry. You can't eat any of the fancy crap served up here. This food is for you and your friends, not us. We're going to Burger King to get some real food. Besides, you wouldn't allow us to even bring the kids, right?" "Yes, that's right. As much as I love all my nieces and nephews, none of them were invited. I didn't want children here. I wanted a strictly adult wedding. Now, I know you don't like that, but you did exactly what you wanted for your wedding? How could you know? You weren't even there? And you know why? I've said sorry 1,000 times. It's time you let it go," I said. Jack put his hand on my arm. "Come on, Adam, this is your sister's wedding day. Now, if it's your intention to upset her, then it is best you and Susan leave now and go enjoy your Burger King banquet." Adam never liked Jack, said he was arrogant, but he was wary of him. Talk about calling the kettle black. I could see how he was struggling to keep from screaming obscenities at my Prince Charming, like he did at me many times over. Jack looked the kind of man who could handle himself and, as the future was to prove, Adam was very much aware that my husband was very smart and likely to be making a lot of money. And he did. It wasn't long after our marriage when Adam called and asked us to co-sign a loan he wanted to take out, a very big loan of $125,000. No way, Adam, we don't have the money. For God's sake, we don't own our own property or home yet. I assumed that would be the end of it, but I had no idea of his ability to wear people down. Yes, he was pushy and aggressive, but this was my first experience at seeing how pushy he had become. For the next 2.5 months, he called every day, sometimes 2 and 3 times a day. I was at college full-time, so by the time I arrived home it would be late afternoon. That's when he would always call. It got to the point that I did not want to answer the phone. Did you think about it, Amelia? Did you talk to Jack? You know, this isn't what you would call a traditional co-sign deal. This is different. There's no risk in it for you. I can make the payments. Come on, give me a break. I didn't fall off the turnip truck yesterday, Adam, there's only one type of co-sign. You don't pay, I have to pay. It falls on me and Jack. No, this is different. Don't try to lay that crap on me. The answer is for the last and final time, no. We can't anyway. I've told you before, we don't have the money. You can't or you won't. He screamed. Interpret it any way you want. We are not going to do it, and that's the end of it. He had nerve. I had to give him that. Little did I know this was just the beginning. I should have been more aggressive and not let it go on for 2.5 months. Who am I kidding? I could never be that way with him. Saying no to him this time would turn out to be a short-lived breakthrough. I could never be that way with him. Oh. There was the clue, in the language. His power over me, I could hardly ever say no to him and mean it. The pathology of my behavior seems obvious now, but it wasn't at the time. Despite a degree in psychology, it would take years to see how it applied to me. That was the first time he ever asked for so much, and the first time I said no and meant it. But, he was always asking. Demanding really, money and help, as if he was entitled to whatever he wanted. He once said he was God, and he was not being flippant. I kept giving in to the smaller requests and demands. He's my brother and that's what families are supposed to do, help? I kept telling myself. I was 8 when he was born. I loved him a lot, but he was extremely spoiled. We would take walks, especially in the fall, and jump in the leaves together. I really did enjoy those times. One of the best times I recall was the blizzard of 1978. We walked in snow that came up to his chest and crossed over the reservoir with me holding his hand and doing my best to forge a path for him. As he got older, he became condescending and judgmental. He did not care whose feelings he hurt. When he was 15, I moved to San Francisco. I didn't see much of him after that, but when I came home to visit I would occasionally go out to a movie or have lunch with him. For the most part I had a good time, but not always. It was my birthday. Adam had won tickets to a Joan Jett concert, so he took me. It was a beautiful night. I was in a good mood, happy to be hanging out with my brother and happy to be home with my family and friends. The place was crowded, people everywhere, excited, waiting for the concert to start. Then it happened. Some guy stepped on my foot, accidentally. Ouch. I yelled and grabbed my foot. Adam went ballistic. What's up with you, buddy? You step on my sister's foot, and do I hear a sorry, an excuse me, or an equals are you okay? No. He screamed, threatening and taunting the poor guy. Then I saw Adam had a knife on his belt. I could not believe it. What was he doing with a knife? That freaked me out. I was really scared then. The guy who stepped on my foot was clearly ready to take Adam on. I knew that something really bad was going to happen. I forgot about my foot. I had to act, and quickly. I stepped in front of Adam. "Cut it out, Adam," I yelled. "I'm not hurt. It's no big deal." Adam was crazed, and for a moment I thought he was going to attack me. "What is the matter with you? Don't you get it? It was an accident. Now, for God's sake, cut it out." Adam lowered his eyes and adopted what had become part of his defense, his belligerent pout. "I was looking out for you." I apologized to the guy, and he moved on, thank God. Later, when I asked Adam why he had a knife, he said nothing and told me it was none of my business. "You know, Adam, you used to be cute once. I don't know what is going on with you now, but you've developed a huge chip on your shoulder. You better get over it, or your life is going nowhere." How prophetic these words would turn out to be. What I said had as much meaning to him as water running off a duck's back. His behavior only got worse. He got meaner, nastier, and more threatening. I couldn't figure it out. Maybe his behavior at the concert, in his own demented way, was that he liked the idea of family and was being protective of me. Indeed, he was to have 7 children of his own, but paradoxically a story was to emerge of such hellish abuse of his children that I, in all conscience, could not ignore it, and I got involved. Silly me, but I had no way of knowing of the consequences that would profoundly affect my life and the lives of my family. Our dealings with one another after the concert were minimal for many years. In 1987, Adam married Susan. He was only 21. She was just a few years younger than I am, so that put her age at around 25. They met at a pharmacy store where they were both working. Adam had been seriously involved with another young woman, Donna. I had already moved away from home, so I did not get to know her that well, but the rest of the family liked her. Adam was tall and very handsome. Women certainly took notice when he was around. Then suddenly, it was Susan and marriage. It turned out she was 3 months pregnant at the time. The kindest way I can describe my relationship with Susan is that we were never close. She is the antithesis of me. To look at, she reminds me of a tiny rodent, and if she ever speaks her voice has the pinched quality of a squeaking mouse. We rarely shared conversations. Well, except when I helped her move from hotel to hotel and to pay for things. She was attractive, but thin, very thin, much thinner than I, and I'm about 105 pounds. What is surprising is the way Adam is with Susan. Unlike how he controls and treats everyone else, he would do anything for her, anything. It is I who he would call a stupid idiot. He would never speak to Susan like that, ever. Ma said, "Oh, Adam and Susan together, it's a match made in heaven. They are so much in love." "Kman, Ma, get real. A match made in hell is more like it," I wanted to say. What really got to me was the way they treated their children. They were never fed, clothed, sheltered, or schooled properly. They were not even taught the rudimentary necessities of personal hygiene. A litany of charges, court appearances, jail sentences, and flights from the law were to become the core features of Adam and Susan's macabre trek through life. Susan was hopeless as a mother. She would never defend her children over him, ever, ever. They would reach out to her for affection, but she would never respond. As said earlier, I didn't make it to their wedding. I tried to explain why. Adam couldn't care less. It was a personal affront to him and Susan. He carried a grudge about it for his whole life. He was not disappointed or upset, he was angry, mad angry. I met their first child, my niece, Cindy, when she was born. What an exciting occasion that was for me. I love children. My own, Lucas and Abby, are everything to me. I didn't see Cindy again until she was almost a year old. Adam and Susan came to visit Jack and me in Syracuse. It was weird, really weird. Why would I expect anything different? Hope springs eternal is a common saying, isn't it? God, I call it me being naive, or as Jack would say when he was being very Australian, bloody naive. Cindy was pretty much confined to her playpen most of the day and night. I was to find out, poor little thing. When we first got there and I reached down to pick her up and give her a hug, Adam stopped me short. Don't do that, he snapped. And always ask us first if it's okay? What are you talking about? We haven't seen our niece in nearly a year, and you're telling me I can't pick her up unless I ask first. What's the problem? I was to find out that asking made no difference. When I did, they usually said no anyway. She's not used to people? Adam replied sharply. Dear God, how on earth can she ever be used to people, if you don't let us touch her? Jack knew I was getting upset. Oh, Susan, we wouldn't want to spoil the child and have her turn out a brat like some people we know, would we? Jack said, looking right at Susan and ignoring Adam. Jack could be so Australian at times. Later that night in bed we talked, or rather whispered about how equals fucked up, Jack's words, was the way Adam and Susan were raising Cindy. They won't let her do anything. We're walking on eggshells in our own apartment. And, Susan is pregnant again. Why, Jack? They don't even like the one they already have? Your brother has never taken responsibility for his life, and he sure as hell is not about to start. There are more kids to come and a whole lot more crap is going to come with them, Amelia. Prophetic words from the man I loved so deeply. We made love, conscious to adjust from our usually robust and noisy romping. When Adam and Susan left our apartment a few days later, I was relieved, but sad for the life I knew was coming at my little niece, Cindy. Adam was soon asking for larger amounts of money. He said needed $1,400 urgently, told us his tax refund was due, and that he could pay us back as soon as the tax check arrived in the mail. I had just had Abby. Look, we have a brand new baby, I can't afford to give you a cent. Well, we did end up giving him the money and, unbelievably, he paid it back. It was to be the one and only time. There was more, of course. The biggest amount we actually loaned was when Abby was 2. We had just bought and moved into our first home, so we had a lot going on. Would that deter dear brother Adam? Of course not. Adam and Susan had bought a little house in Maine for something like $36,000. It was cheap and it needed a lot of work, but it was the first house they bought, and Jack and I were happy for them. They were only in it for 8 months when Adam called. We owe $5,000 in back mortgages. Jack said we would sign a tax refund check we had just received over to Adam. The check was made out for $6,000, more than was asked for, but it was the full amount of the back mortgages. Buying the house was the first decent thing Adam had ever done, and we didn't want them to lose it. You'll never see the money, Amelia, so don't even worry about it. Jack is a wonderful man. As I said earlier, he was generous to a fault. He had already said to me that if we were in a similar situation, he would hope family would help us out. That's not very likely, I thought. They sent us a thank you note, which was a pleasant surprise. Perhaps they were turning a corner. Hope springs eternal. No way. What came next blew any vestige of hope I had left for them right out of the water. They lost the house. Adam came up with some fiction that the bank manager told him that he would accept $2,000 toward the back mortgage. $2,000? We gave you $6,000 to pay the lot. What's this about $2,000? Where is the other 4,000? A business opportunity came up that would put us right back on our feet? A business opportunity? What business opportunity? We gave you money, our hard-earned money, so you and your family would have a house to live in? The bank manager let us down. He said the $2,000 would keep us in the house? What? Well, what happened? What happened to the $2,000? Haven't you spoken to the bank manager? You're not going to believe this, but he died and the bank couldn't find the documents. You've got to be kidding me. You have signed copies of the documents, don't you? Oh, hang on, I remember. It was a handshake deal, so I could get the business deal done? You liar, you rotten liar, Adam. Go to hell? I slammed down the phone. I was in tears, desperately disappointed, our money just thrown away. Of course, there was no bank manager who said he would accept $2,000. There was no bank manager who died. We found out later that they used all the money we gave them to buy cheap merchandise and rent a warehouse. They would buy salvaged goods damaged in a fire, or water damaged and try to resell them cheap. He spent all the money on that, nothing went to the house, nothing. So, here was Adam and Susan with 4 children, with nowhere to live and no money. I knew that Adam and his family were in for a tough time, but I could not know how horrific and bizarre their story was to become, or how deeply my life and my family's lives would be affected. I liked living in Syracuse. I was able to go home to New England on a regular basis to see my family and friends. Despite saying I didn't want to see Adam again, I did drop in to visit several times when I was in Boston. Adam's attitude never altered. He was always rude and condescending to me. Every time I reflect on those visits, I get angry with myself for allowing the bastard, pardon my language, but right now as I write this I am angry, and I actually yelled the word out anyway, so why not write it down here, to abuse and humiliate me? I let him get away with it all the time and kept coming back for more. Is that crazy or what? I have heard it said that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and each time expecting a different result. I had not seen Cindy in 5 months, which was the last time Adam and Susan came to Syracuse. So, while we were back east, Jack was with me, we visited with them. Adam let us into the house. "What's going on, Adam?" Jack asked, as I kissed my brother's cheek. "Usual crap," he replied as he led us into the kitchen where Susan was leaning back against the sink. Chewing gum and looking hot and sweaty, Susan tried to smile as she opened her mouth to squeak, "Hello, Jack." "Hello, Amelia. You're late. We thought you weren't coming?" said Adam. "Yeah, I can see that. Looks like you were in the middle of cooking something hot, hey, Susan?" said Jack. "You don't have to be crass. I thought you might have taught Jack some American etiquette by now, Amelia." "Geez, brother Adam, lighten up," said Jack. "Where's Cindy, Susan? I would love to see her. It's been 5 months. She's upstairs, sleeping. She's not to be disturbed," said Adam. "Well, I'll wait until she wakes up," I said. "She won't wake up until supper time." "All right then, we'll wait," said Jack, knowing how disappointed I'd be if I did not see her. "What's for supper?" Susan looked at Adam. "I don't have anything for all of us," she said. "No problem. We can get a pizza and bring it back here to eat, enough for all of us, our treat." Jack grinned, enjoying Susan and Adam's discomfort, who we could tell would rather not have us around for supper. "Amelia's here to see Cindy, and so she shall. Come on, Adam, let's go get the pizza." Adam left reluctantly with Jack. Susan, who rarely had anything to say to me, suddenly found the need to attend to some laundry. As was her usual style, she didn't bother to ask if I wanted something to drink, so I took the liberty of going to the refrigerator. In no way was it a surprise to me, the refrigerator had plenty of food in it for them. I guess 15 minutes had gone by, Susan had been in and out of the kitchen a couple of times. I heard Cindy waking up, so I went upstairs to her room. She was standing, holding onto the side of her crib. I smiled, and she giggled. Suddenly, Adam was at the door. "What the hell are you doing? You woke up Cindy?" "No. I heard her wake up. I came up to see if she was okay." "Will you ever learn to mind your own business, Amelia? There are 3 good reasons why you shouldn't have done what you did. Number 1. Cindy is my child, and I have a very specific way I will raise her and the other children Susan and I intend to have. Number 2. She does not really know you. You can see she is upset. She is upset because you are yelling and scaring her, Adam." Adam ignored me and kept up his rant, his voice so full of contempt that I was shocked and even a little frightened. "You don't just run up to her without asking us. And, number 3. We never, ever come to her right away. We let her cry for a bit." Well, Cindy was crying now, screaming really. Suddenly, Jack appeared. "What seems to be the problem up here?" Susan burst into the room and went to Cindy. I could see that Jack was livid. His face was red with anger. With a clenched fist held to within an inch of Adam's face, he spoke in voice edged with icy venom. "Listen to me carefully, Adam. You should never talk to anyone like that. You should never, never talk to any woman like that, let alone your sister. And, let me be very clear, if I ever hear you talk to my wife like that again, I'll have your nuts on your breakfast plate by morning, and there'll be no more little Allertons to kick around in the future." Susan, terrified, was clutching Cindy and looking for direction from Adam. Adam, who I knew was capable of using a knife, was like most bullies, a coward when confronted one-on-one. "Hey, back off, dude. I didn't mean to set off World War III just by talking to my sister. All I want Amelia and anyone else having anything to do with my kids is to understand I don't want them spoiled, that's all. Amelia, give Cindy a hug." "We are leaving?" said Jack. Susan, paralyzed with fear, managed to look at Adam again for guidance. "Give her the kid." As I stepped forward, Susan held Cindy out for me to take her. The gorgeous little baby stopped crying when I cuddled her into my body, but she was trembling and wide-eyed with anxiety. My heart felt like it was being torn apart as every motherly cell in my body cried out for the little girl I cradled in my arms. As we rocketed along Interstate 90 heading for Syracuse, I was watching Jack. He was my dream man, no doubt about it. I watched his hands, strong and lean, lightly gripping the BMW's leather steering wheel, guiding the car with the easy confidence of a surgeon skillfully maneuvering his scalpel through a complex matrix of blood vessels, tissue, and organs without ever raising a sweat. I watched him, feeling safe, feeling the warm tingling energies that rushed through my body every time I fell in love with him all over again. I wanted him. I wanted to make love right there and then. I placed my hand on his thigh. Rain started to hit the windshield. He turned to me and smiled. "Later, honey, after I get you home in one piece?" He reached forward and flipped the switch to turn on the headlights. "It's getting dark, and this rain is forecast to get heavier as we get closer to Syracuse. Love you, honey." I felt a twinge of disappointment, but I knew he was looking out for me. He always did. My mind turned to the events at Adam's house. Sorrow and frustration slowly pushed aside the warmth I had been feeling only moments earlier. Nobody else had ever talked to me like that. Why did I allow Adam? I was shocked. He had been rude many times before, but this was the first time he had been that aggressive and nasty. God, if only I knew what was ahead. His behavior, as mean as it was that afternoon, would turn out to be only the tip of the iceberg. Over and over again I would say, I will never visit with him ever again. And, over and over again I did. I told myself then, he was family. I wanted to know his children and help them where I could. God, every time I saw him, something negative always happened. And Susan? She never, ever said anything to him, nor did anything, like apologize to me for his behavior. That might have meant something. Adam reduced me to tears more times that I can remember. Susan would just sit there and watch. Why do you keep going back, baby? I could never hide anything from Jack, even if I wanted to. He could read my mind. You always ask me that, and the answer is always the same. He's family, you know that? Yeah, I know. Sometimes, though, I wish you could see what I see. I don't think he'll ever change. You know what, I look forward to the day, and it will come, when you've had enough of that bastard and Amelia will begin to look after what Amelia's needs are. Thank you for caring about me, honey. And, thanks for what you did this afternoon. I've never seen you that mad, sure caused Adam to back down. He was scared of you, really unsure of how to handle things, what to do next. Heck, you scared me. I knew deep down that Jack was right, but way back then family was and still is important to me, however no one is more important, of course, than Jack, Abby and Lucas. Screw him, Jack. Screw him and his pathetic wife. I'm done with them. Let's get home and get our own family started. I can hardly wait for you to hold me in your arms and make love to me. Okay, I'm all for that, he said grinning. The rain suddenly cleared, and Jack pushed the pedal a little closer to the floor. The BMW surged forward, and we were soon rushing by smaller towns and quickly closing in on Syracuse. Oh, dear, what a phony I was. I couldn't stay away. I just couldn't. I was to go back and get ever more involved. Eventually, the law, social services and the court systems of Maine were to become part of this tragic story as Adam and Susan grew their family out to 7 children. I so badly wanted to have children of my own, but as much as Jack and I tried, pregnancy eluded me. I couldn't stop the visits to Adam and Susan's place. I had to see the children, they had 2 now, Cindy and Brian. Brian was the firstborn son. Susan was pregnant with her 3rd child. For the most part, seeing the children helped to lessen the ache I felt in my heart from not having my own, but there were times my heart ached more. Nothing changed about Adam. He was as verbally abusive as ever, except when Jack was with me, and I was very concerned about the way he was raising and treating his children. I had been visiting my mother in Boston. After I left, I called Adam to tell him I would drop by their place on the way back to Syracuse and stay the night. They were still living close to the eastern seaboard, Jack was out of town, and I was in a bad place emotionally. I had learned earlier in the week that despite all the doctor and clinic visits, injections and drugs and years of doing this, I was still not pregnant. I arrived outside Adam's apartment, turned off the engine and sat still in the car for a few minutes, staring through the windshield and across the hood without seeing anything, wondering whether I had the energy to put up with what I knew was coming, more of the same old crap. Well, I'm here, I thought. Besides, Cindy's birthday was coming up, and I had brought her some books as gifts. I walked into the kitchen. Adam was standing at the sideboard preparing what looked like a cookie mix. He did a lot of the cooking and cleaning, I'll give him that. I hugged him, anxious, but hoping for the best. What are you making? What does it look like? Chocolate chip cookies. You're late. You said you'd be here half an hour ago? Oh, God. It was all I could do not to break into tears. I took a deep breath and tried to ignore his jibe. Where's Susan? She's resting. Taking care of 2 kids and having a 3rd one on the way, tires her out. Of course, you wouldn't know any of that, not having kids and all. Why are you so mean to me, Adam? You know I want my own children more than anything. Jack and I have been trying really hard for a long time. Well, there's a lot of fun trying though, isn't there? I could feel my face getting red with embarrassment and anger. I wanted to scream, but I knew that Cindy and Brian had to be in the house somewhere. Where are Cindy and Brian? In the parlor? That's where I stayed for the next 2 hours, playing with the children while Adam was cooking spaghetti and making chocolate chip cookies. Cindy was about to turn 5, and Brian was 2. Both were kept in the playpen, confined there for most of their waking hours. I learned from my previous experiences that taking them out of the playpen only caused major outbursts from Adam. Oh, to be fair, there were times when he let them out to play house with me. Susan would drift in and out of the parlor every so often to see what we were doing, hardly saying a word to me. It was well past lunchtime, and I was feeling hungry. I had not been offered anything to eat or drink since arriving. I had some snacks, Cheez-Its, and dried apricots, which I shared with the children, but that was all. Then Adam appeared out of nowhere and snatched the snacks away. Brian started to cry. Cindy dropped her chin to her chest and held up her little arms, limp across her chest and throat. It broke my heart. Why did you do that, Adam? That's healthy food. It's good for them. Look, Amelia, they have breakfast between 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock and supper between 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock. I don't allow any snacks in between. What time do they have lunch? There is no lunch. 2 good meals a day keeps them healthy. They don't get overweight, fat, and disgusting like a lot of American kids. Teach them this kind of discipline now, and they'll do well as adults. I was stunned. You have to be crazy, Adam. Where the hell am I? Is this some kind of Twilight Zone you're living in here? Who told you that crap? For God's sake, children need to eat small amounts of food throughout the day, or they won't develop fully. You can see that Cindy is small and way too thin for her age. You're a control freak. God save the children? Susan slunk into the room, picked up Brian and slunk out again. This is none of your business, Amelia. What the hell do you know about raising kids, anyway? A lot more than you do, it seems to me. Let me remind you, I have a degree in psychology, which includes studies in child psychology and what it takes to develop healthy young minds. Proper nutrition is critical. I don't want to hear any more of this crap. Adam stared right through me. He had lowered his voice, but its tone was cold and menacing. He scared me, and I knew it was time to shut up. I regained my composure, turned my attention to Cindy and tickled her under the chin. Cindy, you're going to be 6 soon? I reached into the shopping bag I had placed on the couch and took out the books I had bought for her. Here, these are for your birthday. They are from Uncle Jack and Auntie Amelia. Adam was watching intently. Cindy was looking at the colorful front cover of a book called The Adventures of Blinky Bill and giggling as she poked the face of the main character. That's Blinky Bill, Cindy. He's a little koala who lives in Australia, a big country like ours but a long, long way over the sea from here. That's all his friends there, little critters that live in Australia. I took her finger and guided it to each of the other 4 characters. That's Nutsy Cola, Splodge Kangaroo, Flap Platypus, and Marcia the Marsupial Mouse. Blinky Bill was one of Uncle Jack's favorite storybooks when he was a little boy growing up in Australia. He got it for you when he was way over there last time. Uncle Jack said to me about Australia. He said about the big lizards that eat little kids up. Cindy's eyes were as large as saucers. I laughed. Uncle Jack was telling you fibbers, sweetheart, teasing you. There are no big lizards in Australia that eat anyone. I gave her a hug. Anyhow, I wouldn't let anything get you. I'd eat them first, myself. I growled and shook my head from side to side. Cindy gave me a big smile and laughed. Actually, I wasn't really too sure at all about what was in Australia, to tell you the truth. I had encounters with hordes of the biggest cockroaches I had ever seen, over 4 inches long, infesting the harbourside suburbs of Sydney, horrible creepy creatures, believe me. So, it wouldn't surprise me someday to pick up a paper and read about a tourist being eaten by a giant lizard somewhere out in the wilds of the Australian bush. It gives me the shivers when I remember the newspaper story of a beautiful young American woman who was eaten by Big Salty, the name given to the monster-size saltwater crocodiles by the locals, as she swam back to a tour boat anchored in an inlet along the far north coast of Western Australia. The other tourists on the boat watched in horror, powerless to do a thing to help. As I tell Jack when we are traveling, good clean hotels in big cities will do it for me. She needs to learn about America's animals, not that foreign crap. I could hear the malice in Adam's voice. The affect on Cindy was immediate. The joyous face of the bubbly little girl of a moment earlier became anxious, wary, nervous, but determined not to let my brother's ugly dark energy shut me down. I ignored his remark and took out another book, one of my childhood favorites. The Cat in the Hat by famous author, Dr. Seuss. As I was showing Cindy the cartoon drawing of the cat in its high top hat on the front cover, her face started to lighten up again. I smiled. She reached for the book. Then, I remembered I had not written on inside the cover, something I always did in books. Wait just a minute, sweetheart. I took a pen from my pocketbook and opened The Cat in the Hat to the inside cover. Give me that. Adam snatched the pen from my hand. Don't let her see you write in the book. He glared at me. I was perplexed, speechless. Are you stupid? He said. I would buy mostly books when I got Cindy gifts. Usually, there wasn't a problem. There was a book one time that he wouldn't let her have, and a doll I gave her another time, but this? Holy Mary, Mother of God, is this the love Christ died for? I wanted to scream and scratch Adam's face off with my nails, but Cindy was already crying. Give me back my pen, Adam? I said, my voice trembling with anger. Maybe, he sensed that this time he had gone too far because he gave it back without a word. I opened the book and scribbled a happy birthday message to Cindy, signed it from Auntie Amelia and Uncle Jack and handed it to her. Cindy looked at her father. Adam didn't say a word, just shook his head and went out to the kitchen. And, that is where I spent what was left of the afternoon, in the parlor with Cindy and eventually with Brian. Susan brought him down from his crib shortly before supper, which was already long overdue. While I was playing with the children, my mind was occupied with a real concern for them, and what was happening with my brother. I had learned enough in my psychology studies to have real concerns about Adam's sanity. He needed treatment, of that I was no longer in no doubt after what had happened earlier. And, the children, 2 now and soon to be 3, there would be 7, what was to become of them? Their future health and well-being could be in serious jeopardy. The food thing appalled me. Children need healthy snacks throughout the day. At one time, I had talked with Ma and a few other family members about his yelling and abusive language. They all had similar stories, including Ma. What? He treats you, his own mother, that way? I said to Ma. It's just the way he is, and we have to deal with it? She said, much to my consternation. Get real. Holy Jesus, the only son, Ma's little boy syndrome, I thought at the time. Not to judge her, of course. I mean, wasn't I coming from a similar thinking? Still seeing him as the cute, innocent little brother I loved to play with, even though I was 8 years older. I started to question my own sanity. Susan poked her head into the parlor. Supper time, children? She squeaked. Is it just for the children, or does it mean me, too? Well, you can eat if you want to. Such hospitality. Why did I suggest I stay the night? A few minutes later, we were all seated at the kitchen table. No cookie for you until you eat all of this up, Cindy? Said Adam, piling spaghetti and meatballs high on Cindy's plate. Your Auntie Amelia doesn't think you get enough to eat? Here we go already, I thought. The setup was in. Don't take it out on her, Adam, it's not fair. You've put so much food on the poor child's plate she can't possibly eat it all. That lot would make up 3 meals for me. He ignored me. I watched her struggle. In the meantime, Brian, sitting in his high chair, was doing his best eating pieces of Kix cereal. Susan was feeding the skinny little baby 1 and 2 bites at a time. Strange, I thought, he doesn't complain or scream for more, but just waits until Susan thinks to hand him another bite. I knew I was going to be in more trouble before the night was over, but Kix cereal. Why isn't Brian eating the food we're eating, Susan? He won't eat pasta, is that it? I guess the tone of my voice was not at its most congenial when Susan, unexpectedly, found herself being yanked into the conversation. She had never wanted to talk with me, ever. I watched, and I have to admit with some measure of barely hidden mirth, her nearly choke on the spaghetti and meatballs she was shoveling into her mouth right at that moment. Next was the urgent and reflexive cough to clear her airway, sending bits of spaghetti and meatball exploding onto the table, some of it managing to splatter Adam as she jerked her head in his direction. I knew I was pushing the envelope, but what the hell? Coughing and spluttering, her face turning to a bright red, Adam was fully attentive to the most precious possession in his life. For a few moments, he forgot all about me and the children. I took advantage of the distraction, grabbed up a handful of cereal and dropped them onto Brian's high chair tabletop. He stared at me for a full minute. Unsure of what to do, he lightly pushed the cereal around the small table. Then he gave me, well, I interpreted it as a wry smile as he started stuffing the Kix into his mouth. Adam turned from Susan to talk to me and immediately realized what I had done. I knew what was coming, but I didn't care anymore. My insane brother was stuffing one child with food and almost starving the other one. "I'm full, Daddy," said Cindy, her little hand toying with the fork, slowly winding and unwinding the spaghetti. "Can I have my cookie now?" "Eat what's on your darn plate, all of it? There'll be no chocolate chip cookie until I see that plate clean." Then he turned back to look at me and smiled. "Auntie Amelia says you will get sick if you don't eat enough?" "That is not what I said, Adam, and you know it. You can't possibly expect her to eat all of that food." "Oh, come on, Amelia, we have to make sure she gets enough to eat." "You said it, this afternoon, right? She doesn't have a cookie until the plate is clean?" I got it, this was the payoff to the setup. Auntie Amelia is to blame. Bitch from hell she is. All right, well, screw him, I can be as unrelenting over the long haul. Susan began hacking and wheezing again. Adam's attention shot back to her. "Some water, Adam, quick. Damn you, Amelia, look what you have done," Adam said as he leapt to his feet. "Go sit on the couch, honey. I'll bring the water to you." Susan, holding her hands to her chest and throat, her face contorted with the most tragic countenance she could contrive, tottered coughing and spluttering to the parlor. She was brilliant. I wanted to shout, "Cut the crap and get your own damn water." But I was thinking it would be a relief to have the both of them out of the room. I know it wasn't right, but when they were out of the kitchen, I scraped some of Cindy's food onto my plate. Oh, my goodness, I got the biggest surprise of my life. Cindy looked at me as if I had done the most terrible thing, as if how dare I go against her father's wishes. I put my finger to my lips. "Shhh. I hissed quietly. There was still a lot of food on Cindy's plate when Adam came back into the room and sat down. Susan followed him, but without so much as a look in my direction, took the baby out of his high chair and left without saying a word. I didn't get to say good night to Brian, let alone give him a hug. I didn't need to be treated like that. I was wishing I'd gone straight on home to Syracuse. "All right, Cindy, finish the rest of it and you can have your cookie." I held my breath, wondering if she was going to rat on me. For a moment, everything except for the ticking of the wall clock was absolutely quiet, although each tick sounded like a gunshot to me. "I'm stuffed, Daddy." She has done her best for you, Adam, and eaten way more than she wanted, or needed. Give her the cookie. Please. Unbelievably, he handed her the cookie, just gave it to her without a word. Cindy looked at it. A couple of tears started rolling from the corners of her eyes. I'm stuffed. I can't eat it. Off to bed then? She wiped her eyes and turned to leave. Hey, where's my kiss equals night? I asked. She paused a moment, and then came to me and wrapped her arms around my neck. As I kissed her on the cheek, I whispered, thanks? And then I gave her a really big hug. Night, Cindy, I love you. It tore at my heart to see her leave, clutching the cookie in her tiny hand. Adam knew she couldn't eat the cookie. That's why he gave it to her then. The mean bastard. Cindy, what are the rules? Said Adam. She turned, came back, handed the cookie to her father and left for the second time. I shook my head as I watched and thought about how fallacious the food thing was. It really was all about his control obsession. You need to apologize to Susan, Amelia? You're kidding. I have nothing to apologize for. You accused Susan of not feeding Brian properly? I did not accuse her. I said emphatically. I asked her a question. A simple question about why Brian was not eating what we were eating. Now, if she has some kind of guilt about. I stopped and held up my hands with a kind of back off, calm down gesture. I'd really had it. I didn't have the energy to get into another argument that would end the same way with his abuse and name-calling. Adam, I am tired. I really want the best for you and your family, but you keep interfering with how I want to raise my family. Will you just keep quiet for this one time in your life and listen? I really care what happens to you and the children. Some things get to me, especially about how important the right food and enough of it is to a child's future. There you go, accusing us of. I hammered the table with my fists. Shut up. Shut up and listen. If you can't keep quiet, I'm going home tonight, and I won't visit again. I mean it. I've had it. I'm tired of the upset every darn time, Adam. I could see that my brother was caught off guard, strangely threatened by the thought that we may not be there for him if he needed us, I surmised. No. No, I don't want you driving back to Syracuse at night. Stay here and leave in the morning? I stayed the night. Adam and I managed to continue our conversation without it becoming a war. I got up at 5:30 a.m. and couldn't wait to get out of the place. I wanted to leave before anyone heard me, but I was shocked when Adam came down the stairs at 6 a.m. He had a bag of Christmas presents for Jack and me. This was April, and he wanted to do Christmas presents. I didn't even get a chance to give you your presents. I was completely taken by surprise and could only think to say quite calmly, if you weren't so busy stressing everyone, we could have done it. None of it made any sense, but I was too stressed to deal with another of Adam's rants. Just take them, he said, handing them to me. We hugged and I left, relieved to be out of there, heading back to Syracuse and my life of love and normalcy. My heart was singing. I had just come from my doctor. I was pregnant. Thank you, God. I was so happy. For 5 years Jack and I had been trying to get pregnant. There were doctors, fertility treatments, pain, miscarriages, uncomfortable surgeries for endometriosis, and then in the month I transferred to an in vitro specialist, I got pregnant. I didn't do the in vitro. That was to come, another long and testing process when I decided to have a second child. A lot of people would try to talk me out of that, but I am a very determined woman. When I set my mind on something, I won't let anything or anyone stop me. It might be painful, and it could take a long time. It took me 12 years to graduate with a degree in psychology, so you can bet on me getting what I want in the end. I could hardly wait for Jack to get home from work. I prepared a basket with a blue theme on one side and a pink theme on the other. On the blue side, I put baby boy things, and on the pink side, of course, girl stuff. Oh, I had blue ribbons, pink ribbons, balloons, and a doll for the girl and a teddy bear for the boy. I also put in a bottle of our favorite champagne for a celebratory toast, and then placed the basket so Jack could see it as he walked through the front door of our condo. I waited. I was so excited I had to pee twice before I heard Jack's car drive up. Moments later the front door opened and he stepped inside, oblivious to the basket. "Hi, there?" I crooned. "Amelia." "Hi, honey." He stood looking at me and then broke into a big smile. "You're up to something?" I walked slowly toward him, grinning from ear to ear. "Oh, oh, you look like the cat that just swallowed the canary. Tell me." "Jack, you walked right by it? Look behind you." "What?" "The basket," I said, pointing. He picked up the bottle of champagne. "Wow." He looked at me suspiciously. "Okay, Amelia. What are you up to? What do you want?" "I'm pregnant." Jack's eyes were the size of saucers. "No shit. How? I mean, you only began going to the in vitro guy a month ago." I laughed. I had been thinking about the timing. "Baby, remember, weeks ago now, when you took me to Long Island for a dirty weekend, that's the way you Aussies put it, isn't it?" "Well, I think that's when I conceived." Jack let out a hoot, picked me up and carried me to the sofa, hugging me as tight as he could. "What wonderful news, Amelia, for you, for us." He lowered me onto the couch. "I know how much you have wanted this. I've known how tough it's been on you, the doctors, the hope, the heartbreak and despair at times." He kissed me, crushing his lips to mine. Oh, his kiss exploded through my body, a wonderful sensation of red-hot passion surging, consuming. Every part of me cried out for my husband. I wanted him in the wildest way, and he took me, right there on the sofa. Afterwards, we sat holding each other and reveling in the peace and easy conversation that comes after making love when, suddenly, Jack sat bolt upright. "Shit. That startled me, frightened me, really." "What's wrong?" "The promotion I was waiting for. It came through today. I'm being transferred to San Francisco." My heart dropped. I was almost too afraid to ask. "When?" The promotion was a big deal, a breakthrough onto the fast track to the high-altitude levels of corporate management with one of the world's biggest, brand-name corporations. "In 2 weeks. They provide a corporate condo for us to live in until we buy something." "I don't want to move, Jack. I don't want to risk a miscarriage after all I've been through." The doctor said the risk of me miscarrying was high. Bed rest would be crucial and compulsory for the 3rd trimester. I paused and looked intently at the man I loved, knowing what this promotion meant to him and us. "Jack, there's no way I'll change my doctors at this stage. You have to understand, I can't leave here until after the baby is born." "Yes, I do understand, Amelia, but I have to go. This is my chance, our chance, what I have been working for. There may not be another." So, that was it. I stayed in Syracuse. Jack went to work in San Francisco and commuted regularly. Despite lots of scares along the way, the psychological highs and lows a woman with a normal pregnancy would have to go through, and a car accident early in the 3rd trimester, everything worked out. On the 4th of July, 1994, our daughter Abby was born in Syracuse, simply the most beautiful baby girl that had ever been born. It was a wonderful and glorious time in the weeks that followed Abby's birth, but it was also very stressful. We were preparing for our move to California. We had bought a house in a small town located on the coast near San Francisco. All the family gathered for Abby's christening in the Boston Grand Hotel, the very same place that Jack and I were married 5 years earlier, to the day. I was just bubbling over with excitement and pride. Family and friends were fawning over Abby. Adam was coming with Susan, Cindy, Brian, and the third-born, Becky, who was about a year old. I was growing apprehensive. They were yet to arrive, and my last conversation with Adam had not gone well. They had come to visit with us a couple of weeks after Abby's birth and had already been with us for a couple of days before I managed to catch Adam alone outside the house. Adam, Jack, and I have been talking, and we would like you to be Abby's godfather? Okay. I'd like Susan to be her godmother, too. I know she would love to do it. Here we go again, I thought. He just cannot be grateful for anything. There always has to be something more. I won't be asking Susan? Oh, my God, did he go off the deep end? Why not? What's wrong with Susan? What did she ever do to you? You have never liked her, have you? What was I thinking asking him to be my baby's godfather? I have my own sisters to choose from. Why would I choose my sister-in-law with whom I have never had more than a two-sentence conversation in all the time I've known her? And no, I don't like her. After that, he got really pissed and abusive. I didn't mention anything to Jack, but I was sure ready for Adam and Susan to go home. 2 days with seeing how mean and controlling he was with his children, and getting worse, had been a trying ordeal. Not once did I see either of them pick up Becky, except to change her diaper or feed her with only ever a bottle of milk. Did I ever see them hug Cindy or Brian? No way. Oh, they were very affectionate with each other. If they didn't like the children they had, why did they keep having more? I couldn't figure it out. Poor Brian banged his head on our marble table, a heavy square table that did not budge an inch. He ran into it a second time and cried. Stupid. You are stupid, kid. You hit your head once and you don't learn from it? You deserve what you get? Said Adam. He was a cute little boy. Susan never went to his defense. Sadly, I saw all of this going on, and it really bothered me. What should I do, I would ask myself. The man yelled at the children all the time and called them horrible names. Why don't you take the children out? There's a great playground at the end of our street. I said to him. We lived in a wonderful little neighborhood, and the kids never left the house except for nighttime when they might get to go to the store. I didn't come all the way to Syracuse to take them to a park, said Adam. I was tired of being around him. Oh, there were the times when I would picture him as my cute little brother and consider the concept of family and think that, maybe there was a small chance he might change for the better. Eventually, I reached the end of my rope, again. It happened as I was walking by the playpen, carrying my newborn baby, Abby. Acting on impulse, I reached down to pick up Becky. Don't touch her. Leave her alone? Adam yelled. Abby's eyes opened wide. I could see she was frightened. Becky hardly reacted. That told me how used to the abusive tone of Adam's voice she had become. That was it. You frightened my baby, Adam. That's a major mistake. Now, get your things and get out. Get out of my house. I want you out of here and on your way before Jack arrives home. So, here I am. 7 weeks postpartum and thoroughly joyful and expectant of sharing Abby's christening with the people I love most in the whole world, my family. With some relief, I saw my brother had arrived and was in the hotel lobby. With Abby in my arms, I went over to give him a hug. The bastard pushed me and my baby away. How dare you? I barely managed to get out a little more than a whisper because I was so upset. We got here late because the directions you gave us were wrong, and we got lost. When we finally get here I'm told we couldn't come up to your room. We had to wait down here with everybody else. I am your brother, and you treat me like shit? Keep your voice down, Adam, please. This is Abby's christening, for God's sake. Adam always wanted to be the most special person around. So, he's upset because he couldn't come up to my room. I could have let him come up, but he always causes such stress, and now he was proving I made the right decision. What a pig. I saw Susan waiting across the room. I couldn't believe what she had on. For our daughter's christening at one of the finest hotels in Boston, Susan was wearing corduroy pants, cowboy boots, and a sweater. She dressed like she was going to a rodeo. Why is Susan dressed that way? I told her that since she wasn't part of the ceremony, she didn't have to dress up. Adam could be so vindictive. I have made mention of some moments of kindness that would come from Adam. I want to be fair. After all, it was also these positive aspects of his nature that would emerge from time to time that helped keep alive the flicker of hope I had for his reformation. It was at the christening that he paid us back the $1,200 he borrowed. Oh, it was the first and last time he would ever do that, but it made for a favorable impression at the time. There was the beautiful baby album and card he gave Abby as a christening gift. He liked giving gifts and would spend outrageous amounts of money on them. For Abby's christening and her birthdays, he would spend upwards of $500 on presents for her. Money and material things meant everything to him, but he spent money on things he couldn't afford. And then there was the expectation that we should spend as much on Susan and him and his children. I remember an occasion when I gave him a very nice polo shirt, and Susan a brand name pair of slacks, but it wasn't enough, it was never enough. What's this, Amelia? You know I don't like shirts with logos on them. And those pants, they just aren't Susan. She'll never wear them, and frankly I wouldn't let her be seen dead in them. Sadly, he had a way of quickly killing off the goodwill his gifts created. I think family was important to him, and gift giving was his attempt to prove it. I guess he gets the spending thing from Ma. She was totally into material stuff. She spent lavishly on gifts for us as kids. We wanted for nothing, but I could have cared less. I wanted a home, a really nice house like my cousin's that didn't have cockroaches running all through. I would have given anything, traded everything I had, the record players, the records, the Barbie stuff and the expensive clothes, just to have a nice, stable home. As an aside, my sister Margaret was just like Ma and Adam. She had always been struggling for money since she gave birth to her first child, but she'd spend on things she couldn't afford, like diamond pendants for her children's graduations. You have to be crazy, Margaret, I said to her once when we were at Ma's visiting. She was complaining about not being able to pay her mortgage while showing me a diamond ring she had just bought for Joanne, her daughter, who had just graduated 8th grade, for God's sake. You don't have enough money to pay the mortgage, but you go to Costco and spend $300 instead of going to bank and telling them what you can pay them. What is that? I owed the bank $1,400, and I only had $900. What's the point? How can you argue that kind of logic? Another side to Adam that pleased me was his fondness of Abby. The gifts he gave her were certainly an expression of that, and she really liked him. He was great with Lucas when he came along and his other nieces and nephews. Margaret was to have 9 children. So, it was this behavior, these sporadic acts of kindness that kept me thinking that something good for he and his family was a possibility. I could be so naive. 18 months after Abby's christening, Abby, Ma, and me went to visit Adam and Susan and their 5 children. Baby Keith was the newest arrival, in the house they had managed to purchase in Maine. We were happy for them and, of course, our hope was that this signaled the beginning of new and better possibilities. We had the occasional contact and visits after the christening despite my usual and adamant declarations after every visit that it was the last. But, I would always come back to my concept of family and what it meant to me. As I said before, and I was to say it again and again, I was always hopeful that Adam might change, revert back to that cute little boy that was my brother. We pulled up in the front of the house after a 2.5-hour drive from Boston. There was a good amount of fresh snow on trees, house roofs and the ground. Everything looked so pretty. I carried Abby, who was wrapped up in her winter clothes, into the house. Ma and Jack followed. Abby was surrounded by Cindy, Brian, and Becky as soon as I put her down. I picked up Becky and hugged her. Adam appeared out from the kitchen yelling, "Cindy! Brian! Becky!" He pointed to the adjoining room. "Out of the way until you are called, you can look after Keith?" "Adam! We just walked in. I haven't seen my grandchildren for months, and I want to give them all a hug," said Ma, chastising the son she spent his lifetime spoiling. "And you might be a little more thoughtful and appreciative by first of all giving your Ma a hug and a kiss." Adam gave Ma what could only be described a quick peck on the cheek. "You know I love you, Ma." He turned back to the children. "Now, give your Nana a hug and then scat." He took Becky from me. "You too, Becky, you can be in the playpen with Keith," he said pointing. I looked at Jack, who simply returned a, "Well, same old crap," roll of his eyes. As the children left, Adam scooped up Abby. "How is my favorite kid?" he cooed as he tickled her under the chin. Becky stopped in the doorway to look back. Her sad little face said all. My heart broke for her. "Come on, Abby, let's show you around our new house," said Adam. "Where's Susan?" asked Ma. "She's busy in the kitchen." "Come on, let's take a look at the house. You can see her later?" Becky was still standing in the doorway. I leaned over to pick her up. "Leave her, Amelia." "Becky, I told you to get in the pen with Keith, now get." I ignored Adam and reached to put my arms around her, but she pushed me away and ran into the room with the other children. "You are such a prick, Adam," I hissed quietly, not wanting the children to overhear me. There was no harm in letting Becky come along. I gave her an instruction. "You tried to interfere, once again. I have told you before, don't do it. I'm raising my kids a certain way and that's the end of it. You can shove your house, Adam. I'm going to stay here with the children." I reached for Abby. "Come, Abby, come play with Becky." Abby held onto Adam's neck and looked at me, her eyes squinted. N.A., stay unca Adam." Wow, that really stunned and hurt, I can tell you. My baby preferred my brother to me, what? I looked at Jack. I could see he was getting frustrated. Poor man, he'd had just about enough of dealing with the dysfunctional antics of my brother. He had told me over and over that it would never change, just get worse. Ma somehow broke through the frustration and building tension by being assertive. "Well, I want to see the house, so I'll show myself. If you kids can't stop your squabbling, I'm probably better off without you. Come on, Jack, you and I can check the place out." "No. No, Ma, I don't want you tramping through the house and not seeing it properly," Adam replied, suddenly a little panicked by Ma's challenge to his authority, and worse, in his own home. "I'll get Susan, and we'll all go. I want everyone to see it." God, I wanted to yell, "Screw it!" But with the children in mind, I managed to keep my mouth shut and nod a reluctant affirmation, and so keep the peace. Susan and Adam showed us the house. I made a few suggestions about room colors and furniture placement. By the time the tour was complete, I was feeling conciliatory and genuinely pleased for them once again. I had Abby after she drove Adam crazy, squirming about in his arms trying to get back to me. I must admit I felt a certain smug validation of my motherhood as I slipped my daughter onto the comfortable support of my hip, something the male body form was not designed to do. Oh, everything was soon a return to the same old crap, though. Back in the kitchen, Adam and Susan sat nibbling on nuts and cookies while we looked on. They didn't offer us or the children a thing. I never experienced such a lack of manners like these two could manage. Where they learned it, I have no idea. Not from my mother? She was generous to a fault and always made sure we were never hungry. I should have been used to his weird behavior, but I kept hoping he would get some manners or something. Well, while you two are stuffing your faces, I'm going to be with the children. Come on, Jack. Before anyone could say a word, I was out of my chair and heading for the living room. Keith was standing up, holding onto the side of the playpen. He was only 8 months old, and he spent most of his time in there, as had Cindy, Brian, and Becky through their infant years. Sadly, because of the amount of time they spent standing up and circling the confined space, rarely being allowed outside to play and exercise in the fresh air and open parks even as they got older, the weight on their tiny little legs would eventually result in all of them having bowed legs, seriously bowed legs that would become another issue for Adam and Susan to answer for when the Department for Families and Children's Services would become a huge part of this story. Abby and Becky were in the pen standing on each side of Keith watching Cindy, who was sitting on the edge of a couch holding up her Blinky Bill book and pointing out the Australian animal characters one at a time. "That's a kangaroo, Keith. See his big tail? They hop, hop, hop like this." Abby jumped around the pen looking very earnest about her imitation. Becky joined her. Keith giggled and dribbled. I wiped his mouth. "Tell them where the kangaroos come from, Cindy," I said. Brian cut in. "They come from where Uncle Jack lived when he was little like me." "Good job, Brian." "Where is that, Cindy?" "Where does Uncle Jack come from?" said Jack. "Austria?" said Cindy. "Right, Australia," I said. "Now, who wants to come outside and play in the new snow?" Me, me, me?" a chorus of voices shouted back. "All right then. We all need to get some warm clothes on first." Suddenly, Adam was in the room. "Hey, what's all the noise here?" "Auntie Amelia said we could go out and play in the snow," said Cindy, her gleeful face of a few moments earlier now worried and uncertain. Adam looked at me as if I had 5 heads. "Are you crazy? They're not going out. Don't just assume that they can go out and ask them without asking me first. It's too much work for us to get them all dressed. You only have one, so you don't understand?" I glared at him and then turned to the children. "I'm sorry, children, your father said you can't come with me?" My heart dropped, but I was determined I was not going to allow Adam to stop my child from having fun in the snow. "Abby, come with Mummy. If I wasn't married to your sister, Adam, I wouldn't give you the time of day. You shouldn't have kids. In fact, if it was up to me, I would advise some serious surgery," said Jack. "Stop it, Jack," I said. "Not in front of the children. I'll get Abby into her warm clothes, and then we'll have a play in the snow before we go home." I turned to Adam's children. "I'm sorry, children. We'll do it another time." The only one of them not crushed was Keith. He was too young to know how mean and controlling was the creature who was his father, or was he? Keith started raising hell. I had seen him have tantrums before, but this one was frightening. It was an insight into a personality that I could tell would get him and his parents into a lot of trouble. Ma rushed into the room and picked him up. "Goodness gracious, Keith," she said, patting him on the back, her voice soft and soothing. "It's all right, Nana will take care of you." Keith started to calm down. "What on earth happened, Adam?" "I was taking the children out to play in the snow, but Adam said they couldn't, Ma. It would take way too much work for him and his precious wife to get them ready." "What a schmuck. It would do the kids good to go outside, Adam. I can help get them ready." "Don't you start in on me, Ma." I said no, and that's what I mean. You are being unreasonable and... Ma, let it go. I'm taking Abby outside for a few minutes before we leave for home. The children watched us from the front window looking so sad. I was all at once angry, exhausted, disappointed with the continual letdowns and tired of not being able to shut Adam out of my life. Whatever I said, I knew I couldn't do it, not to the children. Whenever I would think of them, I would see their sad little faces and know what they were going through. I couldn't desert them. I just couldn't. I enjoyed the children when we visited, and I liked that my baby got to play with her cousins, notwithstanding that it was on most occasions in a very odd way. Adam's controlling and, in charge mentality over everything they did, how to play, when to play, what to play would prove to be extremely damaging to them as they got older. He hovered over them like a hawk. Even Ma and I had to talk to them in a certain way, play with them in a certain way. We couldn't voice our opinions without being eventually dragged into a vortex of darkness, which I now know it to be an evil energy that would leave me feeling empty and soulless for days. On our drive back to Massachusetts, Ma and I spent most of the journey talking about Adam, Susan, and the children. Frustrated at not being able to figure out Adam's crazy behaviors, we agreed all we could do was let go and pray. It was shortly after we arrived back in San Francisco from the trip to Massachusetts that things really started to unravel for Adam. I have already told you part of the story about the money we loaned him for the back mortgages, the time when he approached us and we loaned him the $6,000. You have some understanding now why we couldn't let his children suffer, we just couldn't. And this was the first time in their lives that they had any stability. They had already moved, as I recall, in and out of at least 9 homes. So, you heard the first part of the home loan story, but there is equals a rest of the story. Just when you think things can't get worse, they do. Before I get into the equals rest of the story and pick up on the business opportunity that went bad, which Adam eventually told us about, I want to back up a little, because I did give him some advice in the phone conversation when I told him Jack and I had agreed to give them the money. Adam, you have to stop having babies. It's time for you to grow up and be responsible, for God's sake. You've had 7 different jobs in the last year? I keep telling you, I haven't found the right fit. It's tough. I try. Give it up, little brother, I've heard it all. The jobs will never be any good as long as you keep quitting. The truth is you don't want to work to get ahead. You think you should be the boss and giving orders right away? I've been injured working hard for these pigs and then they fire me? Yes, 5 times that I know of where it was disputed that you were actually injured on the job. They happened for real, Amelia. You have a vat of hot grease spill on your arm, or a heavy shelving unit that falls on your back, and see how you feel. A back injury can cripple you for life? That can happen, but, Adam, in every one of your accidents, it's never your fault, and you sue, or try to sue the employer, every time? But you've never been successful, have you? You're just lazy and don't want to work for a living like everyone else. I got disability? And a reputation. The employers soon figure out whether or not someone's trying to swindle them. Adam had high hopes of suing all of these companies and making his fortune, but it never worked out. He always wanted to be rich, but he wouldn't do the work it took. He was willing to take the low road, to lie, cheat and break the law to get what he wanted. What's really sad is that he's extremely smart. He could have gone to college and succeeded in anything he set his mind on. It took me 12 years to get my bachelor's degree in psychology, but I never gave up. He could have done the same. Adam, go to college in the evenings. Work hard at something that will take you into a career and a good paycheck every week for the rest of your life. What? I can't leave Susan alone day and night with all the children? I have an idea, stop having children? I replied. I was wasting my breath. His only chance, an alcoholic friend of mine in recovery told me, was self-recognition of the problem and then wanting to do something about it. Until he reaches that point, no amount of counseling, cajoling, promises or threats will make him want to change, my friend said. So, here's equals the rest of that story. It was a miserable day. A misty rain had the roads wet and visibility made driving difficult and dangerous. I was on my way to the airport to pick up Jack, who was returning from London after being away on business for 10 days. I was so looking forward to his return. As I strained to see through the mist and the spray flying up from the speeding cars that make up San Francisco's kamikaze traffic, thoughts of Adam's latest mischief kept crowding my mind. He'd lied to us. He had already lost the house when he asked us for the $6,000. He used most of it to buy pallets of merchandise that he was going to sell cheap from a warehouse. The story he fabricated was what my brother had become, a liar and a cheat. He rented the warehouse, and they lived in it. I was shocked and furious that I had been so duped and such an idiot. God, where did that come from? Of course, that's what he called me, an idiot, didn't he? Maybe, he was right. I am a soft touch, aren't I? A car raced by and a huge wave of water blanketed the windshield. I had the wipers on full speed, thank goodness. I saw the red brake lights of the car in front in time to brake and avoid slamming into the back of it, just the sort of incident that starts one of those deadly chain reaction accidents that happens all too often on Californian highways. Abby let out a tiny squeal, but I had her well strapped into her car seat. Sorry, baby girl. We're nearly to the airport. We'll see Daddy soon? Daddy? She said, and a big smile lit up her face. Relieved, I smiled, and then jerked my attention back to the road. Jack was so right when he told me we would never see the money again. Adam was spiraling out of control and making bad decision after bad decision. Now, he, his wife and 4 children were living in a warehouse with no windows and no bathroom except a toilet and a sink. I was disgusted that he would let that happen to his children. I didn't give a damn about his wife. She was old enough to do something, but she chose not to. What mother who would allow her children to be, well, I didn't have a scrap of respect for her. I was late by the time we made it to the San Francisco International Airport. Fortunately, the bad weather had delayed the arrival time of Jack's flight, so he had been waiting no more than a few minutes. It was so good to have him back. I missed him when he was away, Abby too. The sun was starting to break through the mist as we reached the coast highway. Abby was strapped into her car seat in the back and Jack was driving, so I was able to look about and appreciate the magnificent views of the surrounding hills that eventually dropped spectacularly into the blue waters of the Pacific Ocean. What's the latest on that brother of yours? I looked past Abby at Jack and shrugged. As usual, nothing good. In fact, their situation in the last few days has gone from worse to desperate. So, tell me. They are on the street, sleeping in his van. They don't have a thing. The landlord found out that they were living in the warehouse, and he told Adam they had to move out. Of course, Adam was his usual belligerent self, and that just made matters worse. One evening when they were all out of the building, the landlord changed the locks. When they returned, they couldn't get back inside. Their clothing and furniture were still in there, and the landlord's not letting them get a thing until they pay the rent they owe. Can't say I blame the landlord. How much is he asking for this time? $800. You can bet that is more than he owes the fellow. I'd rather we didn't give Adam cash. There has to be a better way of dealing with this brother of yours, Amelia. Jack looked out to the ocean. Get a boat, set a southwesterly course, keep sailing for 7,000 miles and we run slap bang into the east coast of Australia, honey. We just might do that someday, be a great adventure. You'd be on your own, mister. I have a terrible time with cockroaches on dry land, let alone all those eat-you-up critters out there. I've seen pictures of great white sharks big enough to swallow people whole. No. They like to have a bit of a chew first and color the water up with blood and guts. Jack laughed, bared his teeth and made ripping noises as he acted out a shark biting into a fleshy carcass. Would the big shark eat me up, Daddy? Abby's voice, barely audible, carried with it a tinge of fear. I turned and saw that her eyes were as wide as saucers. No, my love, Daddy is being silly. Sharks don't eat little girls. I patted her knee to reassure her. Jack, you frightened her? I wouldn't let a shark get my little girl, Abby. I'd punch it on the nose and scare it way away across the big water so it would never come back. Jack drove quickly through the twists and turns along the coast highway. I felt very relaxed and happy for the most part. Another child and my world would be just perfect. My eyes started to feel heavy and slowly began to close. A lawyer? What? I was suddenly alert. A lawyer, yes, that might be best. Get Adam a lawyer to sort this out. We'll pay the retainer? Oh, I forgot, he did mention a lawyer. He said that's one of the reasons he needed the $800 in cash. Well, he's not getting cash. I'll contact a lawyer tomorrow. Adam's not going to like that. He's in no position to argue. Jack aggressively changed gears and gunned the BMW. Through a series of S-bends where the coastal highway edged dangerously along a precipitous drop into the waters of the Pacific. As the tires fought the forces threatening to break their grip on the black tar, their squeals of protest mixing with the throaty roar of the BMW's motor had my body tingling with excitement, stirring within me a powerful desire to be in my husband's arms wrapped in the intimacy I missed so much every time he was away for even a few days. Jack turned to me and smiled, a knowing smile of how his driving that way was a turn-on for me, and he was so right. My attention went to his hands as he negotiated a bend. I loved his hands, beautiful hands. I was mesmerized by them in their effortless choreography of deft movement around the leather steering wheel as they kept the car perfectly aligned and under control. The realization of being on the edge of the cliffs with the possibility of oblivion a few feet away only stimulated me more. Abby was laughing and slapping the car seat with obvious delight. Mother awareness kicked in immediately. Honey, you'd better slow down. We have Abby on board, and it has been raining? He slowed right away and looked back to his giggling daughter. She gave him a beautiful daddy's little girl precocious smile. Drive faster, Daddy, drive faster. You like that, Abby, don't you? Daddy and Mummy were being silly, Abby. Mummy and daughter are beautiful, Amelia. It's good to be home. God, how I love this man. I'll talk to him, if you like, said Jack. What? Adam. I'll talk to him. Oh, yes, of course, Adam. I looked at Jack and felt so cared for. I love you looking out for me, sweetie. But, no, I'll talk to him. You have enough going on. Now, get me home, mister. All that charging through the gears and squealing through the S's, we have some catching up to do, Galahad. It was dark outside. I had just settled Abby into bed. Jack had called to say he was on his way home, and I was taking advantage of the time I had to myself to relax and catch up on a little reading. I had left messages for Adam during the day asking him to call me back, but telling him I would not be available in the evening. So, ignoring my request and displaying his usual lack of consideration for any inconvenience his timing might cause, the phone rang and, of course, it was Adam. Yes, my cynicism had grown to the point that I could no longer think of anything other than he was deliberately calling at this time to get a rise out of me, or more probably, in some perverted sense best known to himself, he was asserting his perceived power over me. Unfortunately, as I look back, he did exert enormous power over me, didn't he? Is Jack back? Did you talk to him? Do you have the money? It would be nice, Adam, if you would ask how we are first. You know, like, how is Abby? How was Jack's trip? Are you pregnant yet? The sorts of inquiry normal families engage in when they greet each other. I could sense my brother's tense and agitated energy readying to cut loose from the other end of the line. Jack and I spoke, yes. We are considering how best we might help you. Amelia, We're desperate. I need that $800 now. You have to help us, for the sake of the children?" There was an edge of panic to his voice, and it caught me by surprise. I immediately dropped my guard. He knew me inside and out, and he was going after the area of my greatest vulnerability, family and children. "I told you last week, everything we have is in that damn warehouse, our furniture, our clothes, the household things and the storage unit full of stuff we need desperately. Everything we have in the world is in there, baby pictures, wedding pictures, the kids. Books and playthings, everything that you would have in a home. The kids are devastated. Even all that merchandise I purchased to get us a start, a way of building a new life where I could give my family everything they needed in the world to make them happy. It is all locked inside of that warehouse. Now, they have nothing, Amelia, nothing." I was conscious of the sadness and compassion I felt for Adam and the children. I had to stick to my guns, or the feelings were going to overwhelm me. I remember focusing on my 56 breathing as I fought for control and the strength not to cave in. "Jack is making inquiries with a law firm to see how realistic it would be to even fight this, or maybe set up a payment so you can get your stuff out. He lost it? I need that money, Amelia. I need it now, and I want it now," he screamed. He couldn't contain himself. The demonic Adam emerged, and he became his belligerent, nasty, and thoroughly rude persona. Strangely, he didn't frighten me this time. In fact, I was suddenly empowered. I think I was so outraged by the ferocity and vitriol of his attack and demands that it really stirred up the anger I had been suppressing. "Shut up, Adam. Who do you think you are talking to? You just assume that we should help, don't you? No, worse. You somehow in your twisted thinking believe you are entitled to our help. My God. We gave you $6,000 and hundreds of other dollars here and there. None of it has been paid back. No acknowledgements of gratitude. You have no shame. And, here we are giving it another shot, still backing you, trying to work something out. If you would just for once take responsibility for your circumstances, Adam, there would be no need for us to be screaming at each other." "Yeah, well, while you're thinking about working something out, just keep in mind that mostly everything we own is in that warehouse. Hey, that's entirely your fault. I'm not going to take any blame, try being responsible for once in your life. You don't trust me? Oh, that's a news flash. Get real, Adam, you don't have any bridges left to burn. Take it or leave it, that's it?" There was a long pause. I said nothing and waited in the deafening silence. "What you are proposing won't work." The tone in Adam's voice was suddenly conciliatory. Just like that, it changed from belligerent and nasty to the opposite, charming and respectful in a few seconds. Well, I think there was a hint of panic in there, too. "Amelia, please. Will you talk it over with Jack one more time? Think of the children, please." I heard a couple of muffled sobs. Oh, I was a sucker every time he trotted out that act from his vast repertoire. He was the master. I'm almost too embarrassed to write what happened next. "Adam, I'm sorry, I'm really sorry about what's happening to the children, but this is your entire fault, yours and Susan's, accept that. I'm sorry, too, Amelia. If it was just me, it wouldn't matter, but, the kids, it's just the kids are having such a hard time, and Susan is struggling too. Adam, stop it. I don't give a damn about Susan, I never have." I paused and let out a deep breath. "I'll talk to Jack." I put the phone down. What had I done? I felt sick to my stomach. Once I had bought into the children and the family strategy dished up from Adam's playbook along with a few tears thrown in to maximize the effect, it was over. I was powerless. I wasn't looking forward to telling Jack I'd been suckered again. I need not have worried. He smiled, told me I had a beautiful heart, and asked me how I wanted to handle it. Eventually, we gave him $800. They were able to get most of what they had in the warehouse and storage units. It turned out that they had 2 units stacked full of personal belongings, clothing, and furniture that they accumulated from their constant changes of address between all the places they lived. Adam was out of work. Well, he had the boxes of merchandise to start his business, but I think he even knew that was going nowhere. They had 4 children, plus 1 on the way, and no place to live. They were desperate. For a second time, they went to live with Susan's parents. It was inevitable that these arrangements couldn't last. Ron and Louise had a nice house and property with an in-law unit they had built for Louise's mother, Susan's grandmother. When she died, it became available. Perfect for Adam and Susan, and you guessed it, Adam had no problem taking advantage of the situation when it suited him. The family would move in, but it would be Ron and Louise who would move out into the in-law unit. Adam, Susan, and the children would take over main part of the house. This was the arrangement on 3 of their occupancies. I say occupancies in the sense of an army taking over another country. Ron and Louise found that they were living under rules laid down by their son-in-law. It was the usual Adam control freak mentality. You might ask why people would put up with it at all. Adam has an extremely powerful personality. You really have to experience his presence to get it. Poor Ron and Louise were at their wits' end by the time the 3rd occupancy was underway. They hated Adam. They were beginning to despise Susan, their own daughter. I mean, that's how bad Adam's tyranny was getting to them. They reached the stage where they didn't want anything to do with their grandchildren. Adam shut them out of the children's lives just as he shut them out to a greater or lesser degree with all of us. Domination and control, the central themes of his way of being, have already been well documented in the story, and I am yet to get to the worst of the consequences, horrific consequences. Ron and Louise were mortified, of course. In their own home, they were not able to touch their grandchildren when they wanted. They were forbidden to talk to them about Santa Claus, or the Easter Bunny. In fact, it was basically inferred that they shouldn't have conversations with the children unless one of the parents was present. There came the 4th and final time when the Allertons, desperate as usual, needed a roof over their heads, and once again they turned up on the doorstep of Ron and Louise's home. At last, but still generous to a fault, Ron put his foot down. Fine, but you guys are in the in-law unit. Adam and Susan never paid a cent for anything. Ron and Louise would buy them food, clothing, and personal items that soon add up to substantial amounts of money for a large family. It cost Ron and Louise a small fortune to repair all the damage done to the unit. The bathroom was flooded time and again, eventually ruining all of the downstairs area. One way or another, Louise and Ron were out almost as much money as Jack and I. For the next year or so we continued to send money for groceries, gas, oil for in the house, money to fix the car, and on and on and on. Adam went through jobs like crazy. I don't know how his wife could stand it. I know I was getting tired of continually bailing them out. What we had given them, I couldn't say equals loaned anymore because I knew we would never see any of it again, was adding up to a considerable sum. There was the $6,000, the $800 and the hundreds of other dollars given here and there, running up a total already past the $9,000 mark. Jack was amazing the way he supported me, but I knew it wasn't fair on him, on both of us. And it was very stressful for me. I was trying to get pregnant with our 2nd child, and I just didn't need Adam's problems any longer. Something had to change. I picked up the phone and called his number. Yes. Adam, it's Amelia. Can you? I know it's you. Do you think I'm stupid? I've got caller ID to check what idiot is calling. What do you want? Why did I bother to call? It was always the same unless he wanted something. My energy level tanked. Why can't you be decent to me, Adam? Gosh, we've helped you out so many times. Jack works hard to provide Abby and me with the things we need to have a good life. Why can't you do the same for your family? You have got to be joking? Jack's had a charmed life, a silver-tail job handed to him on a platter. That's never happened for me. What's he making, $1 million plus? Yup, you're right Adam, millions and millions. Don't insult me, Amelia, I know he's making millions. What's a few dollars to him to help out family? It's what he should do. I wanted to scream. His sense of entitlement and absence of any gratitude whatsoever was so frustrating. I wanted to go after him and tell him how Jack worked extremely hard to get to where he was, and that if he, Adam, would have done the same, he could have been just as successful. But, I didn't. I'd been over the same story on countless occasions. I decided on a different approach, to confront him head on. The old game just ended, Adam. No more cash. That's done. Instead of wiring $200 here and $300 there, we are setting up an account at the local grocery store? What? What do you think this is, some small town like Mayberry RFD, and they'll let you do that? Are you stupid? He yelled at me, a reaction I pretty much expected, and for the most part I was resigned to. His use of the word stupid, something he called me many times over the years, somehow relieved me of the guilt I usually felt over these conversations. Yup, I already checked with them. And take this any way you want, Adam, I'm tired of your condescension, your anger and abuse. I don't like you, what you've become, and I don't care what happens to you. The only reason we are working out a deal with the grocery store is because of the children, so they won't starve since you can't take care of them. You're crazy. I have to buy gas, stamps and other things I can't get at the grocery store? Not my problem. I said, relishing the newfound power in my voice. We've gone way above and beyond what help any rational person could expect from a family member. But, Amelia, how do you? You have 2 months to work it out. Then, the cash payments are over and the new deal kicks in? We set up the account so he couldn't go over a certain amount in a month's time. He was furious, but the little bit of sense that he had left took over, and he accepted our deal. Eventually, he found another job, but his car broke down and he didn't have the money to fix it. I'm not going to try to explain why we did it, but we helped him out again. And, here they were still living with Ron and Louise and not paying them a penny in rent. I guess they were so good at conning us that they were able to put enough money away to get a down payment on an apartment they eventually moved into. We didn't hear much from them for some time, but with Adam and Susan's history of screwing up now firmly established, we knew that it would only be a matter of time before the phone would ring, and it would be Adam on the end of the line demanding we help him out. In the winter of 1997 I finally became pregnant. It seemed that all the tests, the treatments, the pain, the discomforts and challenging commitment to the in vitro process were worthwhile and had paid off. I was wrong. To my consternation, I miscarried in April. It was a horrible, horrible period in my life. When I arrived home after getting the news from my doctor, I just collapsed on the couch, worn out from crying. I think I was still in shock when the phone rang, and I answered without bothering to check the caller ID. Amelia. Oh, God. Adam. He was the last person in the world I wanted to hear from. I thought about hanging up. Amelia. Answer me, damn it. Yes? I could hardly get the word out. Speak up, I can't hear you. I sobbed a couple of times. What's the matter with you? I explained. I'm sorry about that. I suppose it wasn't meant to be, God's will and all that stuff. There was a pause. I waited for what I knew was coming. Amelia, we don't have any electricity. The only time I ever heard from him was when he wanted something, so I wasn't surprised by his equals problem. It was always money for some damn thing. I was on autopilot, asked him how much he needed and hung up. I didn't want to bring up Adam's request with Jack, so the next day I closed out an old savings account I'd had for ages. There was $800 in it. I wired the full amount to Adam and followed up with a phone call. "I've sent the money, Adam. Don't call anytime soon. We're raising our own family, and all of us are very upset from losing the baby." I spoke quietly, hardly having enough energy to speak to anyone, let alone Adam. The last thing I wanted was more abuse or a fight. "We can't raise your family. Just leave us alone. Stop having babies, you are incapable of looking after those you have." He cursed me and hung up. There was no thank you for the $800 I sent him. Good riddance. Jack was really good. Over the years, he did extensive research looking for places where Adam could get a good job, where it would be a good environment to raise the children and an inexpensive place to live. It didn't matter what Jack came up with, or what advice we gave him, he was either above it, it wouldn't work for him, or he'd tried it before. He never accepted any advice. All he wanted was a free ride and money just handed to him. We wouldn't have a lot of contact with him for the next few years, and I wouldn't meet his last 3 kids until the next disaster erupted, which was inevitable, of course. So, he never called, and I certainly wasn't about to be the one to pick up the phone and call him. Besides, I was very focused on my infertility treatments, and they took almost all of my commitment and energy to keep to the demanding and risky regime necessary for any chance of my getting pregnant again. And of course, more important of all, taking care of my baby girl during all of this. I have to admit that I was rather peeved more than a couple of times when the thought crossed my mind that not once did Adam call to see how I was doing, or if I was pregnant yet, nothing. He knew what it meant to me about having another child. Despite knowing who he was and what he was like, I couldn't help feeling sad and hurt when he never called to inquire. It would have meant a lot to me, if he had shown some empathy. Eventually, we heard through the family that he was homeless again. There were 7 children now, all of them, along with Susan and Adam, living in a van he was driving. I can't imagine how horrible that must have been. He homeschooled the children and always had. It wasn't a good situation, how could it be with Adam's control issues? The children had no social life, they had no friends, and they didn't go out to play, whether it was outside in front of their house, or going to the playground. They didn't go to museums and beaches. It was so sad. "Why don't you let the children go out to play, or be with other children, Adam?" I asked once. "They have each other. They don't need anyone else, or be in a place where they would be exposed to germs. The playgrounds, parks, and schools are teeming with them." I could think of 1,000 reasons about what Adam was saying was not only wrong, but tragically, he was denying his children the opportunity of developing a normal and successful life in their community. I knew it was hopeless to argue, but, for God's sake, Adam, I hate to say it, but if this is what you truly believe, then I have to wonder about your sanity and my sanity. My sanity. Listen, you bitch, you don't say that to me. You hear me? I'll tell you who's crazy. You. I'll raise my kids any way I want. They will do exactly what I tell them to do, and they'll be all the better. Stop screaming, Adam. I shouted. I was really angry now. In that moment, I wished my brother would disappear from the face of the earth. You selfish, conceited loser, the way you are raising those children is going to screw them up for the rest of their lives. They will be so incredibly maladjusted that they won't know how to fit into their communities. It'll be all struggle, courts, prisons or mental institutions that will be the story of their lives after you are done with them. Bitch! He screamed. Then he was gone, leaving me with a shrill ringing in my ears. Unfortunately, these words would soon have a prophetic authenticity to them. The courts, prisons and psychological inquiry were to become a reality in the lives of the Allerton family. I washed my hands of him, or so I thought. Oh, how so naive I would prove to be yet again. After years of in vitro and 9 surgical procedures, I finally succeeded in getting pregnant. Surgery, of course, carries with it risks, and often friends and family would ask, "Why are you doing this, risking your life? You have Abby to take care of?" While it is not up to anybody to tell me that I should be satisfied and responsible, their comments caused me to consider whether or not there was an ethical dilemma I had not faced up to. After all, if the worst happened and I died, Abby would be left without her mother. I think it was shortly after I miscarried, Abby was 3 at the time and playing with her dolls on the couch, when I decided to talk with her. "Darling, as you know, Mummy lost the little baby growing in her not long ago, and I know that was a really, really sad time for all of us." Abby nodded. "I have something very important to ask you. You know how much it means to me to have another baby, a little sister or brother for you to play and grow up with, too, don't you?" "Yes." She looked so sweet and vulnerable. My eyes moistened, and my heart felt like it was going to explode with the love I felt for her. "I love you, Abby, I don't want to ever hurt you." "What's the matter, Mummy?" "I love you and Daddy, too." She was hugging her favorite doll, and her beautiful brown eyes, big like saucers, were looking right into mine. I leaned over and kissed her forehead. "It's just that sometimes I worry you might not think Mummy loves you enough because she is trying so hard to have another baby." "Do you ever think that?" Abby looked puzzled. Her frowning face seemed to be saying, "What a stupid question." "What? Abby, do you want me to keep trying to have another baby?" Her face broke out into a huge smile. "Oh, yes, Mummy, of course I do. It would be such fun. I could bath him and feed him and—" I laughed, relieved. "Abby, our baby could be a girl. We can't know what it will be yet." "I know. It will be a boy." I couldn't know then that Abby would be proven right. It didn't really matter, though, I just wanted a baby, and the odds for that happening were not good. Months later I was at my doctor's clinic and on my 8th in vitro fertilization. With the miscarriage and the failures of getting pregnant weighing heavily on my mind, depression was becoming a frequent visitor. Each visit to the clinic seemed to last longer than the previous one. My doctor was worried. "You know what, Amelia, we're not doing this anymore," Dr. Rashid said. "There is only so much medication we can give you. As women age, starting at the age of 35, so do their eggs." To say I was stunned would be putting it mildly. "Doctor, there are women out there older than me who are having children." "True. But, you don't know how those women became pregnant. There are so many ways, and you having a uterine abnormality doesn't help." I knew he was right, but I couldn't bear the thought of giving up. "So, that's it, there is nothing I can do." "I would do anything for one more try." "A donor, someone else's egg in my body, no way. I can't do that. My baby has to come from me. A baby from a donor would not be mine?" I could feel my heart racing. I wanted to cry as I began to realize that any hope of having another child of my own was over. "No, it doesn't have to be like that, Amelia. We have come a long way within the reproductive sciences. These days, we can take DNA out of the good part of your egg and inject it into the donor's eggs. The procedure is called cytoplasmic transfer, and the baby would be genetically yours, and it would be fantastic if you had a family member, especially a sister." Suddenly, there was hope. My heart thrilled with possibility. A miracle? "You mean, you're saying the baby would still be genetically mine, right?" Dr. Rashid nodded his head. I was over the moon with joy. "Amazing. That's wonderful. Let's do it." "Okay. Find your donor, and remember it won't be easy for her. She has to go through the same kind of rigorous testing, medications, and surgery that you go through. A good place to start looking might be among your family, your sisters and cousins. I don't know why, but right away my sister's face, Tina, flashed into my mind. Thank you, doctor, I think I know who I can ask. I'll be in touch. I left my doctor's office, picked up Abby from the receptionist who was keeping an eye on her and walked to the car, feeling like I was floating on air. As we started out onto the highway, I glanced over to Abby. You know what, my love, we are going to Scranton to find Auntie Tina. We haven't seen her in years, and I'm not sure if she still lives in the same place, but that's where we will go. Oh, fun, Mummy. I'll be Nancy Drew, and we'll find her. Can I be Nancy Drew, Mummy? I chuckled, it might be handy to have a super sleuth to help track down Tina, I thought. Of course, you can, Nancy Drew. You're just the one I need to help me find Auntie Tina. On the drive to Rhode Island, I thought a lot about Tina, our lives together, her life after she left home pregnant at 16, and the years between that had passed so quickly. Of all my siblings, Tina had always been my favorite. We shared a special bond. I would do anything for her. I wondered if she would be willing to help me now. It had been a long time since we had seen each other. She was the youngest of us all, Uncle Steve's third child with Ma. Some might refer to her as my half-sister, but she was like a full sister to me, and because of the common DNA threads of our fathers being brothers, whom I mentioned in the opening pages, scientifically she was as much as 85 or 90% my full sister. It seems silly mentioning it again, but I am still fascinated by the extraordinary circumstances that are the causation of the DNA speculation. Whatever, we were very, very close despite the 16 years difference in our ages. Sometimes, it almost seemed like she was my child. I loved taking care of her. Tina's adult life has been turbulent, that's for sure. She was 16 when her first child was born, Andrew, who is now 18 as I write this. The twins came along 2 years later. The father of the twins was an alcoholic and a no-hoper, but I have to say that his daughters were two of the most beautiful girls I'd ever laid eyes on, next to my own, of course. Tina has always been a single parent. She has a ton of guts and has really done her best for the children without any help from their father. He has rarely given her 1 penny for child support, ever. We helped out when we could, but she was fiercely independent and usually reluctant to accept help. She put herself through nursing school and graduated as a registered nurse. Moving to Rhode Island was a huge decision. It was totally a selfless act on her part because she went there for her children's education. She knew that as single working mother, she would never have the money to send her children to a decent school. However, by moving to Rhode Island, especially Scranton, and after living there for 2 years, the children qualified to go to the academy for free. This was the only way that Tina could afford to give her kids a decent education and the opportunity to ever to amount to anything. Talk about guts. She had it in spades. As hard as Tina tried, Andrew and the twins hated Rhode Island. They went to the academy, but all 3 of them ended up leaving for various reasons. As tough as she was, the constant struggle of being the sole income earner along with raising her troubled children gradually wore her down. She went into a depression and kind of isolated. She wouldn't return phone calls, and finally we rarely had any contact. Most news of Tina came through Ma, which was how I learned she was working in a hospital and at the time living with some guy named Jimmy in her trailer park home. I called the hospital and left messages without telling her what I wanted, but she didn't call back. I thought about giving up, but Abby wouldn't let me. Please, Mummy, we have to find her. Let's go there. I know Nancy Drew could find her. She's not calling me back, my love. I'm not sure I can remember where they live. Besides, she might not want to see us. She does, I know she does. She loves us, and I love her. Don't you love her, Mummy? She is your own sister. She would want to help you, if you asked her. Of course, I love her. She is my favorite sister, and you're right, Abby, she would want to help me. We arrived in Scranton around noon after a 3-hour drive from Syracuse. It was summer, and the weather was beautiful. I think before we start looking for Auntie Tina we should stop in at the Maple store, Nancy drew. What do you think? Oh, yes please, Mummy. Abby's face was beaming as she clapped her hands excitedly. An hour later and still sucking on maple candies, we were turning into the first of Scranton's motor home parks. This doesn't look very familiar? I said as the first signs of the anxiety I was feeling crept into my voice. No, Mummy, this is not it. It's not far from where you can see the hospital on the hill. Don't you remember? No, baby, and I don't know how you can. You were only small when you and I were here last. Nancy Drew could always remember everything. We drove through that park and then the next two. While I thought I saw Tina's trailer a number of times, they all looked so alike, Abby would be adamant that they weren't. Finally, as we drove around the little roads in the fourth park, Nancy Drew pointed to a trailer and said, "That's it, there." Abby waited in the car while I went to check. Tina's boyfriend, Jimmy, came to the door. He was startled to see me. "Oh, my gosh. What are you doing here?" The twins suddenly appeared, saw Abby who was getting out of the car, and ran to her. "I'm here to visit my sister. Do you want to come in?" "Tina's not here. She's at work, at the hospital." There was no way I wanted to go inside and wait with Jimmy. I could hear the girls laughing behind me, playing and having fun like they always did when they got together. The twins had always been Abby's favorite cousins. "No, thank you. I really must speak to Tina." "How do I get to the hospital?" "You can see it from here?" He pointed. "It's on top of the hill, there." I grinned to myself as I thought of what Abby had said earlier. It's not far from where you can see the hospital on the hill. She was amazing. I turned to leave. "I don't know why your sister doesn't want anything to do with you, but you had better make sure you don't upset her." I looked back at the man. "What do you mean?" "Don't set her off again, that's all." What the hell did he mean? I could feel the level of my anxiety rising and the muscles in my stomach beginning to knot. "Can I stay with Linda and Casey, Mummy?" My attention shifted to the girls. I declined but offered to bring the twins with me. It was joyful looking at their happy smiles. Jimmy said it would be all right to take the girls. After waiting in the reception area for about 10 minutes, Tina arrived. She took one look at me and started to cry. We hugged. I was so happy to see her. "It's been so long, Tina. I've missed you." She stopped crying. We sat down in two sofas facing each other, clasping hands. "I have a question for you," I said. "Why did you drop out of our lives?" "I really don't know. I left messages. You never returned one of them." "I can't talk about it," she said. I nodded. I didn't want to upset her. She was obviously going through a tough time. Her face was certainly showing signs of strain. She actually looked much wiser. We talked some more, and then she said she had to get back to work. "Wait, Tina. I have to ask you something. I need your help. Can I have one of your eggs?" I was not being very subtle, but I needed to get to the point. I had to get this done, time was running out. "What?" she said somewhat startled. As I began to explain, she got it and stopped me. "I'm off in an hour, meet me at home?" "I'm going to get a hotel room for Abby and me." "You meet me at the hotel? It's okay to stay at the house?" "No, really, it's okay. You stay at the hotel with us." We ate at the hotel. Tina and I were able to talk later on about the eggs while the children watched television in the hotel room. "So, will you do it?" "Yeah," she said. The only thing I am worried about is the medication. Hell, I don't like taking an aspirin, but I'll do it for you, Amelia. You took good care of me when I was a kid. Tina was marvelous. When I asked her how she really felt about giving me her eggs, she said, "What do I care, I'm never going to use them. Besides, it wouldn't be my baby." When I look back over my life and the lives of my family members, there seem to be more surprises, twists, and turns than were in the most complicated maze ever constructed. The story of my in vitro and Tina's eggs really was the most amazing of them all. Tina and I went through all the preparation and medical procedures, and the transfer took place on July 18, 2004. A month later, I went back to see Dr. Rashid. He examined me using the ultrasound. Ah, good. So, you are just about 2 months pregnant now? No, doctor, I am exactly at a month today. The transfer was done on July 18? No, no, according to this ultrasound you are at 2 months? That can't possibly be? Well, did you and your husband have intercourse in the months before the transfer? Well, of course, but it can't be. I had this transfer? I stammered, somewhat shocked and puzzled by what I was hearing. Then you were pregnant before the transfer? Holy Mary, Mother of God, it seemed that Jack had fertilized one of my own eggs. Oh my, it is so weird thinking back over the circumstances of how the doctors believed this happened. The in vitro doctor I was seeing was going through bankruptcy. His group had most of their equipment taken away, so when they did the transfer, I was literally in a little closet space area, and they had no ultrasound machine. Normally, they are supposed to use the ultrasound while doing the transfer to make sure that the transfer had, in fact, taken place. I just sat there for a full half hour without saying a word. I didn't know what to think. There was the doctor's explanation, but I wasn't completely satisfied. I had doubts. When I got home, I called Tina and told her. "I'm going to do a test?" I said when I had finished. "Why bother, it's your baby." I went ahead, anyway, and had the blood test. The test is very expensive, but I did it. I was told that they can find with above 85% certainty who the baby is genetically, but when there is so much genetic sharing as in my case, it's just harder to tell. They told me about a test that cost $4,000. I decided, he's my son whether it was my own egg or my own sister's. When I saw Tina again, she was thrilled. "You know, I'll do it again for you, Amelia." I gave her a huge hug. "You're so beautiful." "Thank you." Lucas was born in February of 2005, on Valentine's Day. A beautiful baby boy, 2 months early, but he was fine after a month's stay in the NICU. It was a scary time, but once I got him home things couldn't have been more perfect. It had been 2.5 years since I had seen or heard from Adam. I really didn't want to have anything to do with him ever again, to be honest. But, the inevitable happened. I found out that he and his family were in serious trouble. And, as crazy as it sounds, I was about to allow them to re-enter our lives again, both emotionally and financially, and watch, powerless to change anything really, as the shocking consequences of Adam and Susan's insane behaviors dramatically impacted the lives of their children. It was October 1999, and Adam was living in Maine. Social services where they lived was investigating an allegation of educational neglect because Adam's school-aged children had not been properly registered for homeschooling. Adam, being Adam, of course, disputed the claims in his usual confrontational manner. A Maplewood police lieutenant was assigned to assist in the resulting investigation. Coincidentally, the lieutenant knew Adam professionally when Adam worked as an animal control officer for the Maplewood Police Department. Yes, I have said it over and over that Adam was brilliant, that he could do whatever he set his mind to, and here he was once again able to convince an employer to give him a job that was in the midst of an institution that was the antithesis of what he believed should be applied to himself. Lieutenant Randall 1 was surprised, Adam had never mentioned that he had children. He had never seen children playing outside whenever he drove by the Allerton home, or when he dropped Adam off during the day. He did notice the blinds would be drawn, or at night there would be no lights on, that the house would always be dark like nobody else was living there. They moved from there and were living in the in-law apartment of Ron and Louise's home. Randall arrived at the equals new address and began knocking on the door. He had to knock hard and for some time before anyone answered. Louise opened the door. "Do you have to make so much noise? Who are you?" "Lieutenant Randall, Maplewood Police Department, ma'am," said the plainclothed officer holding out his identification wallet. Louise took her time to read the details, looking carefully at the picture of the face on the ID and then at the man standing at her door. "I don't know why you police can't wear your uniforms these days," Louise said, taking one last look at the ID. "Scare an old lady half to death, you do? I'm sorry if I upset you, ma'am. I'm looking for Adam Allerton. I believe he and his family live here? What do you want to talk to him about?" "Nothing good, I'm sure." "Why would you say that?" "It's about his kids, I bet, or the bills. Always in trouble, that man, debt collectors or government people all the time showing up at the door." "You don't like him?" "That's putting it mildly. He'll finish up in jail. He never was going to amount to much. Tried to talk sense into that girl of mine, but she never would listen to anything I had to say. She'll finish up in there with him." "Who are you talking to, Louise?" Randall recognized Adam's voice shouting from the back of the house. "Tom Randall, Adam. I need to talk to you," Randall called out. "I'd invite you in, but he'd go psycho if I did," said Louise. Randall was aware of the sad, weary eyes of the woman standing in front of him. "Why don't you go on inside, Louise?" said Adam as he suddenly appeared at his mother-in-law's side, and then immediately ushering her back into the house and quickly closing the door after her. Randall had already noticed that the curtains were drawn, and it was dark inside. It was obvious that Adam did not want him to see into the house, or talk to his mother-in-law. "What are you doing here, Randall? On some kind of official business, are you?" Adam's tone of voice was harsh and confrontational. "One Lieutenant Randall, name changed." "As a matter of fact, Adam, I am, and you know why, don't you? About your children not being properly educated in accordance with the law of the state of Eastern Seaboard? You claim you're homeschooling them. You bastards can't leave us alone, can you? Always chasing us down, always harassing us. My kids get the best education there is under my tutorship, and they get proper discipline 24 hours a day from me and my wife, Susan. Do they, Adam? We'll have to see about that. Now, listen up, you have already been advised that your children have to be registered for homeschooling. That's not done. Second, as part of the investigation, I'm going to have to see your kids. We get that done, and I can get on down the road. No way. No way are you coming in here. I've got 2 of them down sick and 2 coming down with the stomach flu. You want to come in here, you'll need to get a warrant?" Randall looked at his flipboard, scribbled a few notes and then flipped back a couple of pages. "All lies. That's all you've got there, Randall? I'm going to have my lawyer sue for all that stuff written about me," warned Adam. "Yeah, right," said Randall. "You have quite a history of making it hard on yourself, Adam. I'm not going to argue with you now, but as you're going to be in touch with your attorney, anyway, you can give this to him to look over." Randall handed Adam the flipboard and his pen. "And, sign on the line I've marked with a cross. You have an appointment along with your family at the CPS offices Monday?" "I'm not signing this." "You are signing to acknowledge that you have been served these papers, which you now have in your hand, Mr. Allerton?" Randall reaches behind his back and pulls out his handcuffs. Now, I'm warning you, if you don't sign the paper I'm going to cuff you and take you in, right now. That was our Adam, his own worst enemy. No matter how often his behavior came back to kick his butt, he did the same thing again and again. There's that definition of insanity again? If it was just Adam in trouble, who would care, but it affected all of us around him, his children especially. By February 2003, the family had registered for homeschooling in accordance with state law, so there was some reprieve for Adam and Susan. The pressure would build again as the children's state of health was becoming more and more of an issue with the Department of Social Services where they lived. Prior to May 2004, Dr. George Mitchell II, board certified in their state, was the Allerton children's pediatrician at the Enders Health Clinic. This was where the story began to get particularly grubby. It was when the worst consequences of Adam and Susan's unconscionable practices of how they fed and raised their children began to show up in Dr. George Mitchell, name changed. Subsequent physical underdevelopment problems and other health issues. Later, when I was given the document listed in the footnote 3, I had to force myself to read it all. The chronological record was so shocking in its point-by-point portrayal of my nieces and nephews' lives that I wanted to throw it away. The children's suffering was made all the more painful for me when I realized my own part in it, how much I had been in denial of the extent to which my brother and sister-in-law had maltreated them. I really did try to do my best. I lived in a false hope that things could change, that Adam was really a good person who wanted to be a good family man. In the meantime, the children were going through a living hell. All of them, for the most part, were small and underweight, Dr. Mitchell reported in the court document. Becky, who was born in November 1996, was extremely emaciated. She was also behind on her immunizations. The clinic made numerous appointments to see her, but Adam and Susan wouldn't show up. It was October 1988 when Dr. Mitchell saw her again. She was still underweight, and her language and speech problems had not improved. It was the same for all the children. Keith's height and weight were far below the 5th percentile, and he was behind on his immunizations. When further medical evaluation was recommended, Adam and Susan didn't follow through. Lily was found to be severely emaciated, and as with all the attempts of the Enders Clinic to engage Adam and Susan in scheduling and maintaining appointments to address the children's various medical ailments, their parents failed them. So, all of this was going on in the 2.5 years I was estranged from them. And, it was, of course, the time when I was preoccupied with getting pregnant again and taking care of Jack and Abby. It would be 2005, after Lucas's birth, before I would see them again. There was to be a lot more to happen in their lives, a steady spiraling downward of events at an ever-increasing tempo, before I would be engaged in an even more active role than I had been in the years I have storied so far. A year before Lucas was born, Dr. Mitchell made a report of suspected failure to thrive regarding Catherine, born in July 2003, to the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, CPS, in Maine. Catherine had gained only a few ounces over a 4-month period, and she had a heart murmur that was to be checked. Adam and Susan missed all the scheduled medical appointments set up to monitor the situation. Not only that, but the Enders Health Clinic had not been able to locate the family at all. Honest to God, with all that was going on in my life, had I have known about this I would have found Adam and had him thrown in jail. How can you possibly treat your children like that? I don't understand it, and I want to throw up almost every time I think about my rotten brother doing such a thing. 3 Ref. Taken from State of Maine Family Court, Kent County Docket NOS 569-12-04 CNJV 101/1/2-2-05 CNJV PGS 40. Through 103 Docket 4 Ref. Taken from State of Maine Family Court, Kent County Docket NOS 569-12-04 CNJV 101/1/2-2-05 CNJV PGS 40. Through 103. The CPS opened an investigation, and throughout February and March 2004 they sent him letters and spoke to neighbors and relatives. They didn't speak to me because I was in California. When they went to his home they saw an eviction notice on the door. The shades on the house were drawn and a van was in the driveway with the lights on occasionally, they reported. Talk about Keystone Cops, it had to be a no-brainer that Adam and the family were holed up in the house. Why didn't they just break in, for God's sake? Eventually, he contacted the police claiming he had been out of state, and it was no longer necessary for the police to check up on the baby. Adam left a voicemail at the CPS, but wouldn't tell the investigator where he was hiding out. They left him a note telling him that an appointment had been made for Catherine on March 29, 2004 at the Anders Clinic. He didn't show, but he left another voicemail saying that he had learned about the allegations from the police, and that he or the family would not keep the appointment because Dr. Mitchell was no longer Catherine's pediatrician. I have to tell you, my mind was spinning as I was reading about this stuff. How could Adam get away with just simply sticking up his middle finger at law enforcement agencies? I couldn't believe that the CPS didn't have the cops take out a warrant and arrest him. Where was the bottom line concern for Catherine in all this if there was such serious fear for her well-being? Didn't they have to act? Susan was in it up to her ears. CPS investigators were finally able to meet with her on May 2 at the place they were being evicted from. She told them that they were moving out of state, but would not say where they were going. She wouldn't allow CPS into the home to check on Catherine. "You can't come in here. Catherine is asleep, and I don't want her disturbed. Besides, there is nothing wrong with her other than she is a colicky baby, but she is growing and happy. We want to see her," said the female investigator. "I don't want my child disturbed. You people keep harassing us. My husband is going to sue you if this doesn't stop. We want the best for your child. If your child is not seen by a physician, you will end up in jail. I told you, we are leaving the state. We will find her another doctor after we settle into our new home." God, I wanted to scream. "Arrest the bitch and get the children out of there," I shouted as I slammed the document down on the floor and stomped into the kitchen to make coffee. Jack was away overseas. The children were in bed, and I was having my late night time, which I almost always used for reading and writing and often preparing lessons or cleaning house. I poured my coffee and settled back onto the couch, feeling a little teary, missing Jack and wishing he didn't have to be away so much of the time. Still, I realized and was proud of my husband, who had an important job in the world. He was generous to a fault, and made sure that his family did not want for anything we needed to live a comfortable life. I picked up the court documents and read on from where I'd left off. It certainly was a comprehensive expose. At times, I'd wish I had not read all that was in there, that maybe they'd got it wrong, but I knew in truth it was my brother who was the villain living in the pages, and that he deserved to go to jail for the rest of his life for what he was doing to his children. The CPS reported that the Allerton family left Maine at the end of May 2004 and went to PA in the wake of the child neglect investigation. I have no idea where he lived for the first few months other than he had his van with him, and they probably lived in it. There was a report that he had checked into a hotel in September in PA. He was told to leave there after a few weeks for not letting the housekeeper into the room to clean it, and then typical Adam, abusing her when he did let her in. For a couple of weeks after they checked out, the maintenance man said he saw the van frequently parked in the inn's parking lot at all hours of the day and night. So, it was in the van where Adam and Susan and the children must have lived until late October, when he somehow conned another landlord and moved into a condominium in Allentown. It was not long before the Allertons attracted the attention of their neighbors and law enforcement officers. It was rare for anyone to see the children. Certainly, none of the family was ever seen outside during daylight. Here is another episode, Adam 101, taken word for word from the page 14 of the court document 5. The father would back the family van very close to the front door to load and unload the children. All 7 children, from the oldest, age 12, to the youngest, age 1, were carried by the parents to the van. Mr. Allerton avoided all attempts by his neighbors to speak to him and turned his head away to avoid having to engage with them. The school-aged children were not attending public school, nor were they enrolled in an approved home study program in Maine. The windows of the condominium unit were covered and the blinds drawn. Adam and Susan's life continued to become ever more complicated as they tried to stay ahead of the Maine authorities. Finally, all of Adam's shenanigans came to a head on February 28, 2005. A warrant was issued for his arrest. In July 2005, I went back home to Massachusetts to show off my brand new baby, Lucas. Abby was now 10. Lucas was 5 months old, but technically only 3 months as he was born 2 months early, so he was still very small. We were visiting Ma, who was in the rehabilitation hospital and looking worse than I ever remember. She was sitting up in her bed with plastic tubes feeding oxygen through her nose. It was sad and scary to see how a hard life and deteriorating health was ravaging this once attractive woman whom I loved so dearly. I was frozen with fear of losing her. I didn't know what I would do. She 5 Ref, taken from State of Maine Family Court, Kent County Docket NOS 569-12-04 CNJV 101/1/2-2-05 CNJV PGS 40. Through 103. Had emphysema and breast cancer, but like the fighter she had been all her life, she claimed she was winning the battle. Of course, I was all smiles showing off Lucas. Ma was holding him, but he looked a little distressed at first. The plastic tubes, I thought. Abby started tickling Lucas's chest and giggling. She had bonded with him from the first day she saw him and, thereafter, had spent every spare minute with him. She had him soon making baby smiles at his nana. Ma was delighted. What a joy I felt showing off my babies. Finally, Ma handed Lucas to Abby. He is going to be a very handsome young man, Amelia. He'll be quite the honeypot for the young ladies. He looks a lot like you. You went through a long and demanding process to have him. I admire you for that. Congratulations, honey. Thank you. Speaking of Adam, he usually visits me after dark. If you could be here on one of those nights, I know he would love to see Lucas and Abby. No, Ma. I don't want to see him. I know he and his family are probably having a hard time. Some things never change. But, I'll keep my visits to the daytime. Please make it clear to him not to show up when I'm here. Amelia, he is your? No, Ma. I'm serious, I just don't want to get involved with his problems ever again. I have no respect for him, and the way he behaves and treats the children, he deserves everything he's got coming to him. Abby glanced over at me with an ugly frown on her face. She liked her Uncle Adam, who had always treated her like a princess. Pity he couldn't do that for his own kids. It would have been wonderful to show my children off to him and see them playing with their cousins, but I had too often experienced Adam draining my energy on every occasion we met or talked. He was a taker, a bloodsucker. Giving, except for the presents to my children, was an anachronism as it applied to him. Why do you hate Adam so much, Amelia? Ma asked. Ma, you know I don't hate him. I've just had it up to here, I said, raising the horizontal palm of my hand to my forehead, with his troubles. All we ever mean to him is our money, and he'll try to soak us for more and more of it whenever he can. And, I don't need him around upsetting me emotionally, because that's what happens every time. It was time to leave. I wasn't really comfortable bringing Lucas to the hospital, so I kept my visits short. My mother's doctor told me that it was not a good place to bring my children, especially the baby, because he was so little and a preemie. I took Lucas from Abby, and we all kissed Ma. Bye, Ma, we'll be in again tomorrow morning. I love you. Keep up the good work. You're looking a little better every day. I lied. I always hated leaving her. I'll be looking out for you. You've done well for yourself, Amelia, a good husband and 2 fine children. I wish your siblings could have done as good. Thanks, Mama. That was a really nice thing to say. She's up to something, I thought. Nevertheless, I leaned over, put my free arm around her and gave her a hug. Then we left. The next day was a scorcher. The 2005 summer was very hot one, and the temperature was a blistering 99 degrees that day. It was late in the morning, and I was sitting on the porch at the hospital, Lucas in my arms, with Ma, Abby, and my other brother, Billy. Ma seemed a little nervous, and what happened in the next few moments explained why. "Look, it's Uncle Adam!" screamed Abby as she leapt from her chair and ran toward my brother, who was coming from the direction of the parking lot. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was an obvious setup. I looked directly at Ma. "You set this up?" She just sat there looking very complacent. I should have learned that she was never one to be underestimated when she went after something she wanted. I turned away in time to see Abby leap into Adam's arms and watched as he whirled her around, laughing with her as he had always done. I was surprised that he looked as well as he did, a little on the thin side, but he still had his good looks. He put Abby down and came over to the porch, kissing Ma, shaking hands with Billy, who he usually treated like dirt and called him equals the chink, and then turning to me. My heart was racing. After all, I'd not seen him in years, and our last conversation was pretty heated. We didn't hug, but he reached out and gently took my baby out of my arms without saying a word and held him. Lucas kept smiling and cooing. "He's a fine-looking boy, Amelia. Looks like his mother?" It was a bittersweet moment for me. I would have liked a relationship that was normal with my brother, one where I genuinely wanted to hug him and be really happy to see him, but it was way too late for that. "Is that your van?" I said, pointing toward the parking lot. "Isn't that Susan and the children?" I mentioned earlier, it was a stinking hot day. As I looked to where his van, with Susan and the 7 children in it, was parked out in the hot sun, I was filled with anguish for all of them. "Adam, it's stinking hot. What are you doing leaving your wife and children out there like that? They wanted to stay there? Is that so? Well, I'm going to see about that." I stepped off the porch and headed for the van. Adam handed off Lucas to Ma and chased after me. Before I was halfway to the van, everyone jumped out. I was appalled. All of the children and Susan had on long-sleeve shirts and long pants. It was 99 degrees, for God's sakes. Adam caught up with me a second later. "Adam, what's the matter with you? Why aren't the children wearing shorts, or short sleeves and sandals in this stinking heat?" As we know, Adam was not one to be questioned about anything he did. However, on this occasion he was almost cordial, and that told me that he was in a desperate situation and was angling for our help. "They never dress like that, Amelia. They are used to pressure like this. The heat doesn't bother them." I didn't know then the real reason Adam had the children covered up, but I was to find out later. He didn't want anyone to see the abnormal development of his children's bodies. In the court documents I was to read, all the children were described as having badly bowed legs. Medical doctors would explain that part of the reason for their condition was because they had been confined to their playpen for days and weeks at a time. They did not get the proper exercise and nourishment they needed to develop normally, they reported. "Hello, Susan. Hello, children." I offered as I walked up to each one of them, and gave them all a hug. There wasn't much of a response. Susan, carrying Catherine, murmured a hello and tried to smile. I'll give her that. It was like they were waiting for orders from Adam on what to do next. Abby arrived with Billy, who was carrying Lucas. "This is your new cousin, Lucas," announced Adam. The children gathered around Lucas and immediately began to smile and giggle as they fussed over him and then talked with Abby, who was having a great time being with her cousins. Darn it! This was how I had always wanted it, our cousins, siblings and spouses playing together, getting along, being family and supporting one another. Suddenly, it was over. Okay, time to go. Everyone in the van? Ordered Adam. We waved goodbye as we watched them go. I was sad. Where were they going? Their future, what? No future, more likely. Lost souls, drifting rudderless into a world that could be tough to navigate even for the best prepared children? He's in serious trouble, isn't he? I said to Ma after I had walked back to the porch. She nodded and sighed. I kept telling myself for the rest of the day and all that night that, I will not get involved, I won't. It was my mantra. A couple of days later, Ma was home from the hospital. I was there, at her place with the children. Abby was sitting on the couch, cradling Lucas, who was sound asleep. You told me the other day that Adam is in serious trouble. What's been going on, Ma? I hated myself for asking, but I couldn't help it despite my mantra. I expected I would come to regret the question, and I did.